What's going on, boys? Welcome back to the stream. Pencil Shavings, what's going on, brother? Welcome to the stream. Let me just get myself situated here. See if I can pull this up quickly. Man, this happens every time. Sorry, boys. 1 second. Okay, that's good. Set that quickly. All right. Okay, all right. Now we're all settled here. But what's up, guys? Welcome to the stream. This is part of our daily streams. I live stream every single day during the week at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We also do streams on weekends, on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern time. But anyways, I apologize for the slight delay. But anyways, welcome back to the stream, boys. So today we don't have too many things, new additional information to talk about. But before we get into questions or stuff like that, I just wanted to point out a couple things. So the first thing I want to talk about was Paulo Costa. His press conference is kind of weird. Here's the video. Yeah, I don't really know what's going on here. If he's on something or if he's nervous, or I honestly I don't really know what's going on. So this is kind of weird. I was thinking about betting on this guy. I don't know if this means anything. This is just kind of weird. I don't really know what this is, but yeah, that's something. I mean, the rest of the press conference was pretty bad. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched some of it. It was pretty bad. But I guess that's the only interesting part of the press conference. Big On, what's going on, brother? Welcome back to the stream. But yeah, so kind of a relatively boring press conference, but he's on the same thing as Connor. Yeah, he might be. It might be that. Honestly, I have no idea what it is, but maybe it is that. I wouldn't be shocked. But it's not a great look. Looking like that just a couple days before your fight. So we'll see what happens. I know Paulo's been out for a long time at this point, and I don't know. I don't know if he's going through something or whatever, but hopefully everything's all right there, I guess. But yeah, I mean, listen, it's fight week. We obviously have UFC 318 coming up. We have some good fights. We'll see what happens in these fights. In terms of bets, I gave out some plays yesterday. There's a couple additional ones that I liked that I didn't talk about yesterday, so I can quickly talk about that. He spent so much time with the lady boys. Yeah, maybe there's someone under the desk. Who knows? But yeah. So just to reiterate some of the plays that I gave out from the other day, I like Prado. I like Oliveira. I like this in terms of money lines. I like Max. The value's going up on Max, so if the value gets too high, maybe Dustin's worth a shot. At decent plus money. I like Pitbull, and I kind of like Paulo, but I don't know, maybe not. As I said, you can't really trust Paulo Costa at this point. But the additional plays that I didn't talk about yesterday that I kind of like is this: Marvin Vettori versus Brendan Allen, total rounds over 2.5, parlayed with what was the other one? The over in that fight parlayed with yeah, it was the main event. I saw this play online. I kind of liked it, but now thinking about it, I don't know how much I like it is anymore. But it's not a bad play. The over in the Brennan Allen fight and the over in the main event. Parlay them both up, get plus 116. But I think that Vittoria Brennan Allen's a guaranteed decision almost, but The Holloway versus Poirier one is most likely going to be a decision, but I guess I could theoretically see a finish either way. Um, but the play that I actually liked that I didn't give out yet was this was total rounds under 2.5 rounds. I think this is like almost a guaranteed hit, and I know you are talking about a little bit of a premium here at minus 158. But I really think there's a very good chance that this play does hit. Of course, nothing's a guarantee, but I think there's a really good chance for this one. So yeah, those are just a couple of plays for this upcoming weekend that I like. Um, but yeah, I mean, not like too much. There's nothing that I'm ridiculously confident about. Maybe Vinicius, I'm pretty confident, but for the most part, nothing too crazy. But yeah, those are just a couple of things that I wanted to talk about before we get into questions or anything like that. But yeah, we'll see what happens this upcoming weekend. In terms of like additional news besides that, we didn't really see much. We saw that um, what's it called? What was I going to say? We saw that there was one fight announcement. So Alex Perez pulled out against Steve Erceg, which is kind of unfortunate, but whatever. It's an Apex card, whatever. They'll find a replacement for Steve, I'm sure, and they'll continue with that one. This is a new announcement, I guess. Joe Pyfer versus Abus Nurmagomedov in the works for UFC 320. It's a fine fight. I'm sure Pyfer's probably going to win that one. Abus is pretty good, and his cardio has gotten better, but it's still not good. So for a boost, if he can do stuff early round one, then maybe he'll win. But most likely, Pyfer will survive round one, land some big shots of his own, and find his way to a decision. Pyfer's last performance I thought was terrible, but for the most part, I think Pyfer is good enough to beat Abus. Um, but the other thing that I wanted to talk about was um, where is this? Here, this is the one. We kind of talked about a little bit yesterday, but Alexander Volkov and Jailton Almeida are set for UFC Abu Dhabi, UFC 321 in October. So that's going to be a good one. That's like a legitimate number one, or a legitimate number one contender fight for the heavyweight division. And we'll see what happens going from there. Um, but yeah, I'm actually going to be making a video about the heavyweight division not too long from now, just because I kind of feel like we're in a pretty bad spot in the heavyweight division. There's Tom Aspinall, and there's really not too many other guys, um, which is kind of unfortunate. But I guess this is some fight that has some sort of meaning in the heavyweight division. Gon's probably going to get the next shot versus Tom Aspinall. Then after that, Volkov and the winner of Volkov and Jailton Almeida is going to get the next shot. I'm kind of hoping it's Jailton Almeida just because I want to see Tom fight a guy that he hasn't fought before. So maybe that'll happen. Hopefully we'll get some new guys in the heavyweight division and go from there. But yeah, it's kind of not too many great guys, honestly, in the heavyweight division. So we'll see where we go from there. Did you see the press conference? Yeah. First of all, welcome to the stream, brother. But yeah, I did. Well, I saw part of it, not the whole thing, but pretty boring for the most part, I thought. But yeah, Paulo Costa, I don't know what was going on there, if that's what you're referring to. But we'll see. I mean, listen, if he's on something, it's not great. Well, in general, but especially just a couple days out of his co-main event spot. But if it's something else, I don't know. I honestly have no idea what it could potentially be, besides him being on the slopes or something. I don't think he's nervous. He's been on in title fights before. He's been in a bunch of press conferences before. So I don't really know what's going on there, to be honest. But I'm assuming it's probably him on the slopes. I don't know. A weight cut? Yeah, maybe. Actually, maybe. I guess it could theoretically be a bad weight cut or something, possibly. I know guys do most of their weight cutting, like the night of, or well, like I guess like tonight and then a little bit tomorrow morning. But it is like a process that starts before then. But like the main weight cutting, I believe, is tonight, and then tomorrow morning they'll get the rest of the pounds off that they weren't able to get. But people start, to cut out, certain foods a couple days out. So possibly, maybe there's something there for Paulo Costa with the weight cut or something. I don't really know. But we'll see. Hopefully he's good and he's able to fight. And we don't have another Paulo Costa fight cancellation. That would be unfortunate, but we'll see. Um, UCO Romero got stabbed by samurai. So I did actually. That's a weird headline, right? But I actually did see that. But I think I heard he was fine, but or as fine as you could possibly be after being stabbed by a samurai sword. But yeah, that was an interesting headline. And I also saw that guy from the PFL um, got shot a couple times in Dagestan. I saw the video. It's kind of weird. I don't know, but I heard he was all right as well. So I guess that's good. Yeah, some weird headlines coming out as of late. Those two headlines, alongside with Tony Ferguson fighting Salt Poppy, I never thought I would ever read that in my life. I don't know what kind of timeline we're on with that sort of fight, but um, we'll see what happens there. I mean, hopefully Tony Ferguson, could have success. I just don't think so. I think he's pretty washed at this point. Um, but yes, I have no idea. I have no idea. What a what a weird headline, bro. I don't know. That was interesting to say the least. Um, but yeah, we'll see what happens there. Kevin Holland said he wants to set a record for being the most active in the UFC. He wants to fight 7 times in 2025. Kevin Holland fights quite a bit. How many times has he fought already this year? This will be his 4th fight, I think, or is it more? Let's see. So far this year. Oh, sorry. So far this year, this is going to be his 3rd fight. How's he going to fight 7 times this year? This is going to be his 3rd fight against D-Rod. I think it's going to be a relatively easy night for him. I don't think he's going to walk away, coming out of a war or anything, or taking too much damage or anything like that. So I guess theoretically he can probably make a relatively quick turnaround. He would need to if he wants to fight 7 times this year. But honestly, listen, the activity from Kevin Holland is great. I obviously I do appreciate it. The Dana White also really appreciates it, and the UFC appreciates it. Obviously, you can put this guy in like multiple cards in a row, which is great. But the negative about fighting so often is it almost feels as if like he's not really focusing on winning the title. Like I'm sure he wants to win the title, but if you're fighting 6, 7, 8 times a year or whatever, if that's even possible, but if you're theoretically doing that, I don't think you're going to be able to, give yourself the best chance to win all those fights, and I don't think you're really giving yourself the best chance to potentially, contend for a belt. I will say I have said this a bunch of times, but I think at 170 and especially over his last 2 fights, Kevin Holland has legitimately looked very focused, which is a good thing. And he looks pretty good. I think he's pretty well suited for the welterweight division. But the one negative I guess I'll say is if he's going to fight 7 times, I mean, it's kind of hard to to avoid injuries fighting 7 times a year and continue to train and create great game plans against all these guys. It's just hard to do. I mean, I guess it's possible, but it's hard to do. 7 times he got max level of CTE. Yeah. And Holland gets hit a little bit. I mean, he doesn't take like ginormous shots really, and like too much. I mean, he has obviously throughout his career, but he just has an amazing chin. But for the most part, honestly, he does a decent job at avoiding some of the bigger shots. We saw him take some shots for his Wonder Boy, but some of those head kicks that Wonder Boy was able to land. So those were definitely big shots. JDM was able to land some decent shots against him, but for the most part, I don't think Holland takes too many big shots. Spinning elbow actually against MVP is a big one that I remember. But yeah, but fighting that many times, yeah, it's you're really pushing your way towards CTE for sure. But yeah. But we'll see. As I said, I fully expect Kevin Holland to have a relatively easy time with D-Rod. I don't know. Maybe I'm underrating D-Rod a little bit, but he to me he seems like just a guy who's like okay. He has like okay striking. He's not all that fast. He doesn't hit really hard at all. And outside of his striking game, he doesn't really have much of an ability to do anything else. His wrestling's not that good. His jiu-jitsu's not that good. Yeah, I mean, he has a pretty good chin. He was only finished by one guy, which is Ian Gary, ironically enough. But outside of that, he does a great job at surviving, I guess. But I think this is kind of a tailor-made matchup for Kevin Holland. I think early on he'll start to land jabs, big right hands, maybe some left hooks, maybe drop D-Rod, and eventually, I think he'll find a finish, whether that's by KO or by submission. I think he can do either within the first 2 rounds as well. So I think it's going to be a relatively easy night for Kevin Holland, and I think the betting lines suggest that as he is a -500 at the time of this live stream. Um, but yeah, so we'll see what happens in that one. And in terms of some of the other fights throughout the card, they're just all right. They're just all right. Nothing too crazy, but they're probably going to be fun fights. As I said before, I think going into this card, it's probably going to be a scenario of going into it, it's not super exciting, but once the card is over, it I think there'll be like more finishes than maybe we expect, and more exciting fights than maybe we expect. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what we have. One thing that I did want to do is I wanted to react to a video. Sorry, I wanted to react to a video, so I'll pull this up. This is a video about Conor McGregor. What happened to Conor McGregor? Which I think is a decent question. Honestly, Conor's been going through some weird things to say the least as of late. So I thought this was a good one. Pre Whitaker TDP. Pre Whitaker or Prime, I'm assuming. Prime Whitaker DDP versus Paulo Costa. Wait, what? Pre Whitaker. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why that took me so long. Pre Whitaker DDP versus Prime Paulo Costa. Who would win that? I would assume Whitaker. I mean, listen, even when Paulo was in his prime, it's not like he was super skilled or anything like that. The thing that Paulo did very well, though, in his prime was he did a great job at, just pressing forward. He knew he had a really good chin in his prime. Even still, he has a pretty good chin as well. But he did a good job at just pressing forward, throwing some body kicks, getting in on that inside boxing range, throwing some big shots, and he was able to hurt a lot of guys. He doesn't hit all that hard, but he was able to do a pretty good job over the years, such as uh, pressuring his opponents, landing big shots. But in terms of him fighting pre okay, wait, I don't know why I have so much trouble with this comment, but pre Whitaker DDP. Yeah, okay, yeah, my bad. So pre Whitaker DDP versus Prime Costa. Well, pre Whitaker DDP, I really didn't think was all that good. I honestly like on the come up. I know at this point he's amazing. He's shown a great ability to take a lot of shots. Push through things. Showed pretty good cardio. Honestly, shown pretty good skills for the most part. So at this point, DDP is great, of course. But before the Whitaker fight, I really didn't think he was all that great. So him versus Prime Costa, maybe Costa can get it done. Maybe he can stop takedowns from DDP. DDP is also like pretty sloppy. I don't think Paulo would stop DDP. He's a great chin and everything, even pre Whitaker DDP. But I would probably say Costa, Prime Costa. It is unfortunate after the Adesanya fight, he kind of just didn't do. Kind of just lost his confidence and hasn't been all that great ever since then. But Prime Costa was a pretty good fighter. Oh, what's going on, brother? Welcome to the stream. Love your content, man. Just posted my first video yesterday about the UFC 318 predictions. I was sick. That's really cool. Congrats on starting your YouTube channel. It's definitely a fun process. Obviously, my channel is not all that big yet either, but it's a fun process. Just remember to stay consistent, continue to keep posting, and and yeah, eventually, people will catch on. People will start to watch your videos and live stream it if that's something you want to do. And yeah, it's definitely a really fun ride. But yeah, congrats on your first video. Um, Prime Costa for sure. Yeah, I think I would probably agree. I think Prime Costa would probably beat DDP, pre Whitaker DDP. But yeah. Anyways, let's get into this Connor video. If I can just pull this up quickly. Um, there we go.
Canceled my DoorDash subscription and switched to Cookunity after months spending way too much on DoorDash. I got bored of eating the same fast food meals and paying way too much for them. Cookunity.
How do you think you would beat Ilya Arturo? Top Toro.
What's going on, Joshua? You talk so slow. Sorry, my bad. My bad, brother. What's going on, Joshua? Welcome to the stream. But yeah, so this is what happened to Conor McGregor from prime Conor having all the success and being the biggest star to whatever's going on now. So let's get into it, boys.
What happened to Conor McGregor? From one of the biggest stars in combat sports history, the first simultaneous double champion of the UFC, and one of the biggest names just in combat sports in general, to being in the news every other week for all the wrong reasons. What happened to Conor McGregor? And I think we'll go back and look at motivated McGregor just for reference. You know, the guy that knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds, the guy that knocked out Eddie Alvarez to become the first ever simultaneous double champion in the UFC, and one of the best microphone skilled fighters in MMA and combat sports history. I think the Floyd Mayweather fight is a good place to start, because I feel like this was the beginning of the end for Conor McGregor. Now, leading up to the Mayweather fight, it was still Conor McGregor. He was still had good mic skills. He was still witty. He still seemed motivated. Then he fights Floyd Mayweather, and obviously, as expected, he gets outclassed. He's in new territory. Floyd Mayweather outclasses him, ends up finishing Conor McGregor. And 2 months after the Mayweather fight, Dana White announces that we're going to be seeing Conor McGregor versus Khabib. Now, obviously, this was McGregor's return back to the octagon, facing Khabib for the belt. And this would go down as one of the biggest fights in UFC history. And during the build-up, we saw McGregor and Artem Loptov beefing with Khabib and his team. And this was kind of where Khabib slapped Artem, and Conor McGregor just saw red from there. And this was where the bus incident took place, where Conor McGregor and his goons started attacking Khabib's team. They find him on the bus. They start throwing dollies at the bus, injuring different fighters on the bus.
People talk about this all the time, but when Conor, after he fought Floyd Mayweather, a lot of people thought that was probably the decline of Conor, just because he made so much money from that fighting and going forward from there. Conor was just really never the same as he was on his come up and becoming the double champ, beating all the guys like Jose Aldo and a bunch of other fighters previous. But even going into the Khabib matchup, I didn't think he performed like that poorly. I think Khabib is just that good and probably a pretty bad stylistic matchup for him. But yeah, people like to think it was from the Floyd Mayweather fight, and I probably would agree.
And McGregor ends up getting arrested, which would kind of be the start of things going wrong for Conor McGregor. He ends up getting arrested and sued for $50,000 because of this incident. Dana White's talking about it and how he could potentially be, suspended from the UFC. And even in the press conference leading up to the Khabib fight, you could see an immediate change in Conor McGregor. He went from being witty and motivated McGregor to be an absolute mess in that Khabib press conference. It was broken McGregor. Don't get me wrong, he sold the fight perfectly. It's one of probably the funniest McGregor press conference out there. But you could tell there was something wrong with McGregor compared to normal fights. He was drinking, just seemed like a broken version of McGregor. And so the guy went from saying partying is a weakness for the soul to being a complete state, leading even up to the Khabib fight. And then he ends up facing Khabib. And this was one of the biggest soul-taking performances I think we've ever seen in UFC history. And the results of what happened after the Khabib fight is evident of this. He faces Khabib, and everyone said it. He gets smashed to pieces. He gets mauled throughout the fight with Khabib. One of the biggest beatings, probably definitely the biggest beating he's ever taken throughout his entire career. Ends up getting submitted by Khabib after that mauling, and he got absolutely smashed by Khabib. And I don't think he was ever the same after this performance. Not like he was sane coming into the fight with Khabib, but after this fight, he was never the same. Then we go back to March 2019, a couple months after the Khabib fight, and then we have the incident where McGregor ends up smashing somebody's phone, and once again, Conor McGregor gets arrested again, and he gets sued for $11,000, which isn't a lot, but he's still back in prison. He's still in trouble with the law. And then 1 month after that, obviously McGregor has this new proper 12 Irish whiskey sponsorship that he's obviously promoting a lot, and then he goes into the bar, starts promoting his whiskey, and then the incident where he punches some random innocent old man for not taking a shot of his whiskey. He was only fined €1,000 which is obviously pennies to Conor McGregor, but punching an old man in a bar for not drinking your whiskey is, I think that's more evident than anything else that he's definitely not in the right state of mind. And then we kind of go through McGregor's recovery era coming into 2020. And I think this is where we thought McGregor maybe might coming back. We had that fight with Donald Cerrone, and even leading up to the fight with Donald Cerrone, he seemed a bit more calm. He wasn't trash talking Cerrone. He seemed a bit more sane. And he absolutely smashes Cerrone to pieces in just over a minute and gets back in the winning column in the UFC. And we thought maybe McGregor's back. And then he ends up facing Dustin Poirier a second time in early 2021. And then we start to see family McGregor, calm McGregor, the nicest version of McGregor we've ever seen. He was all happy with Dustin Poirier all week, seemed like a nice guy, didn't have a bad thing to say about anybody. And then he gets knocked out by Dustin Poirier for the first time in his UFC career in pretty brutal fashion. And I think, again, this was where he started going back to his old ways, and he was never the same after this fight as well. And then he faces Dustin Poirier the third time, and he got out trash talked by Dustin Poirier. He tried, getting the whole trash talk gimmick back, getting, back to normal Mr. Nice Guy. But even Dustin Poirier was out trash talking Conor McGregor. He looked like a shell of his old self, and he was already thinking about this boxing match with Manny Pacquiao. He wasn't 100% in MMA, and then he faces Dustin Poirier and obviously gets his leg absolutely snapped in that fight, and he would never be seen again in the octagon. A couple months after that, in October 2021, he's already back in Italy, and he's partying despite having this leg injury. He's already back to what he does best, which is partying.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of seems like for Conor, of course, he had a lot of success on his come up, and ever since the Floyd fight, he made a lot more money. What's going on, Pencil? Welcome back to the stream. But yeah, obviously he made a lot more money from that Floyd fight, but it seemed like whenever he lost to either Dustin or Khabib, it really enraged him, and he kind of went down a bad path. And unfortunately, Dustin was the last guy he lost to, and we haven't seen him since. I know he's been talking about potentially coming back to the White House card, but obviously it's a year out from now, and who knows what's going to happen between now and then for Conor.
Ends up breaking an Italian DJ's nose in Rome, which is just classic Conor McGregor. 5 months after this, he's driving a Bentley, and he loses his driving license for a couple of years over dangerous driving. He gets a 2-year driving ban and a €6,000 fine. Again, in trouble with the law every few months. Seemed to be a bit of a recurring theme with Conor McGregor. And then he ends up acting, coming into more of some of the recent years, where he starts filming Roadhouse, and he's clearly blasting gear in this movie. I think people never really expected him to come back. And obviously, if you look at the size of his skull nowadays compared to what it was even 5 years ago at 170 when he faced Cerrone, it's a complete difference.
It was absolutely perfect.
That's true.
Amazing.
Was absolutely perfect. That's true. Amazing.
And then eventually we get to the Ultimate Fighter, where McGregor's scheduled to face Michael Chandler in the Ultimate Fighter, and he does. We see the Ultimate Fighter episode between Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler, kind of his first step in the right direction when it comes back to, the UFC. And Team McGregor goes 0-1, 0-2, 0-3, 0-4, 0-5, 0-6, 0-7, until he finally goes 1-7 in one of the worst Ultimate Fighter performances in coaching history. And I think this is just evident of the state of McGregor and how bad his coaching was during the season of the Ultimate Fighter. And then we have the whole Miami Heat incident where McGregor's at the Miami Heat games. He punches the mascot and ends up injuring the mascot at the Miami Heat game, and he actually sent him to hospital, which caused controversy. But that wasn't even the biggest controversy of the night for McGregor, because then it came out after that there was SA assault allegations, where McGregor had allegations against him over what he did at that event, but they declined to go forward with charges, so nothing ever really happened to McGregor. And then we come into 2024, just fresh after UFC 300. Dana White in the post-fight press conference has announced the return of Conor McGregor against Michael Chandler. So we've now got a date. McGregor's back. He's facing Michael Chandler. He's back in the octagon. This should be a good step in the right direction for Conor McGregor. And then a few weeks after this, the press conference gets cancelled. And then a couple of days after that, Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler is cancelled for the first time that McGregor's ever pulled out of a fight in his MMA career for a broken toe. And after this, he just ends up spending the rest of the year dancing with midgets, doing weird-ass live streams, kicking footballers, which brings us on to 2025. And this year alone has already been chaotic as fuck for McGregor. He starts off the year in, a massive court case where he apparently assaulted Nikita Hand, and he was offered to pay over €248,000. There was this big thing going on over something that happened in 2018 where he essentially harassed a woman, or at least that was what the allegation said. And there was $1.5 million in costs this case. And this was one of the biggest criminal charges McGregor ever had to deal with. He ended up losing sponsorship with Proper 12, which, when you think of Proper 12, you think of Conor McGregor. So for him to be split apart by Proper 12, that shows the significance of the situation. He ended up getting cut out from video games and different sponsorships sponsorships. And then even just the last month, he's been pretty chaotic for McGregor. There's been a video going around of him knocking out somebody in Ibiza in some sort of club. Again, McGregor back to street fighting. And even just this week, BKFC, Conor McGregor's been involved in BKFC. You can already tell he's off his head at the press conference.
He is, but it makes for a great promoter, in all fairness.
Squaring up with Mike Perry, clearly coked out of his mind, and then he ends up kissing some mystery woman during a Florida beach day. So he's been cheating on his wife, which isn't, this isn't any news, McGregor cheating on his wife, but that's been something that's been going down recently this week. And then obviously with Azalea Banks, Conor McGregor in a naked scandal as he's been sending nudes to an artist online that's been leaked online. And this was right before Conor McGregor's birthday as well, that this has been going down. So now McGregor's been sending nudes, lifting weights with his to celebrities online, and I just thought, where has this come from for Conor McGregor? And I kind of feel bad for his wife as well, because she's been with him since the early days. McGregor said it himself, she was with him before he ever made it. And the fact that there's been so many different images and so many different kind of controversies over McGregor cheating on his wife, I feel so bad for his wife, but I understand why she's still with him. I mean, you're talking about McGregor, the guy's got money. But anyway, this is the same guy that wants to run for president in Ireland, by the way. This is the same guy that's still going through presidential campaigns because he wants to be the prime minister or the president of Ireland. So for Conor McGregor to be doing that, I'm not sure the success that he's going to have. But when did it all go wrong for Conor McGregor? There's many different, times that people want to claim McGregor went wrong and where it all went downhill. I personally still think it was the Floyd Mayweather fight, because this was a career peak for Conor McGregor. He was in the prime of his MMA career coming into this fight. He made $100 million, which is more than generational money from this fight. It was an all-time peak in fame. It can only go downhill from here, and it did. I mean, he ended up getting finished by Floyd Mayweather, comes back to MMA, which is obviously his bread and butter. He should do well, and he gets the worst beating of his career, 2 back-to-back losses. And they say,
yeah, I probably agree. I think, obviously, as I said, the Floyd fight, he made so much money from it, so maybe he lost some motivation. On his come up, he was always talking about, obviously, wanting to be successful, wanting to become a champion, and then eventually a double champion. But also a huge part of his motivation was him making a lot of money. So after he was able to make more than generational money fighting Floyd, obviously some of that motivation probably went away. I think some of that motivation came back, though, fighting Khabib specifically, just because they had, their individual beef. But what's going on, 305? Thanks for joining the stream. But yeah, so I think some of his motivation did come back, but unfortunately, it's probably a tough stylistic matchup for him, alongside with Khabib just being a generational type fighter. And obviously, that fight didn't go well at all for Conor, and it kind of just went downhill from there. Losing to Dustin the second time, then losing to Dustin the third time, and obviously we haven't seen him since in terms of fighting. And obviously, outside of the octagon, things have also not went well for Conor McGregor either.
Say it's tough to get out of bed to do road work at 5 a.m. when you've been sleeping in silk pajamas, and that's the exact way you can describe McGregor. He had no hunger left. His career's just been a complete downfall since then. And where's he even going to be in just 5 years from now? Because in the last 12 months, he's broken his toe and pulled out of a fight. He's attacked a DJ. He's dealt with cases that have been serious. He's cheated on his wife, and he's now exposed little McGregor online. Where's this dude going to be in 5 years? It's pretty safe to say he's never fighting again. I mean, first of all, he's overloaded on juice. There's no way this dude's passing any steroid test. He's likely a middleweight. I'd also be surprised if McGregor makes welterweight these days. He hasn't trained, and he's not going to be in fighting shape. I think he gets smashed by anybody on the roster, and he's 37 years old. So I just want to know what went wrong for Conor McGregor. It's like one thing after another. This isn't just a 1 year thing with McGregor now. It's like every other week there's something coming out with Conor McGregor. Now with this whole little McGregor situation between him and Azalea Banks, I thought I'd do this video. Let me know your thoughts on McGregor. What went wrong? When did it all start going downhill? And thank you for watching.
Let me guess. You're thinking about going to therapy.
That's the video. It was a pretty good video. Hit that like button, subscribe, check out his channel if you guys are interested in videos like this. But yeah, it definitely is an interesting topic for McGregor. Obviously, at a certain point, this guy was at the top of the world. I mean, he's still the biggest UFC fighter ever. But it's kind of just crazy to see where he came from, just being super focused, never missing weight, consistently training, being at the top of not only his game, but at the top of the UFC, just, beating essentially everybody. When he beat Jose Aldo as quickly as he was able to, that was a huge surprise. Conor has had some amazing moments throughout the years, but unfortunately for him, ever since fighting Floyd, I guess, and losing to Floyd, ever since losing to Khabib, then losing to Dustin a couple more times, His career has just been going downhill quite significantly, and it's pretty crazy to see some of the things that are coming out now about Conor as the same guy that at one point was the biggest star in the UFC and had all the success over the years. So it is pretty crazy, and yeah, I guess it's pretty sad to see, but we'll see where Conor goes next. I know in the video he said that Conor would never be able to pass a drug test, and he's probably right, to be honest. But I did see recently there were some rumors or reports or whatever of Conor is officially back in the testing pool. I don't know if that's accurate or not. But if he is in the testing pool, I would assume that he's not on anything, unless he's hiding it, like I think a lot of other people are. So we'll see what happens with that. But as I said, there, of course, a lot of people have been talking about Conor potentially fighting at the White House. And of course, it is possible. But for me, even if they do book this fight, I really have to see it to believe it. I need to, I just need to, I need to see him actually walking out into the octagon before I believe he'll actually be fighting. Because even when he was supposed to fight Michael Chandler, he was obviously pulled out with a pretty non-significant injury, it would seem. The McGregor that was on the come up would never pull out of a fight due to a pinky toe injury. But yeah, we'll see what happens. It looks like YouTube blocked some comments. Oh, I apologize about that. Yeah, obviously I don't have any control. Brett, what's going on, man? Welcome to the stream. But yeah, I don't have any control over that. So I guess just try asking the questions in a different way so it goes through. If you guys know how I can turn off any, settings to block certain comments, I'll definitely turn that off. I just don't see any options on my end to turn those things off. But yeah. But anyways. But yeah, welcome everybody to the stream. Welcome. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens on that card. I am expecting a really, really good card. Maybe we'll see John Jones on the card just because he wants to fight on the card. I know he's in the testing pool. He's not retired anymore. Maybe he'll be forced to fight Tom Aspinall at that point. Is he going to actually fight Aspinall? I don't know. We'll see. But if the White House card is not going to make him do that, he's never going to fight on that card. So we'll see what happens for him, and for Conor, I guess it's the same situation. It is possible, I guess, theoretically, that we see both Conor and John on that White House card. I know it's supposed to be a really big one, but we'll see what happens there. I also would like to see other champs or other guys that are legitimately the best fighters in the company fight on that card, especially if it's going to be a huge one. But we were kind of talking about this a little bit yesterday, but obviously, in the main event of a White House card, you're going to need to have somebody that's from the U.S. in that main event. And of course, there's no current U.S. champions at this point. And really, even in terms of contenders, there's not really too many guys that could legitimately even contend for a title. John Jones is honestly the only guy. Outside of John Jones, it would just be, I don't know, like Sean Brady potentially can get a title shot at that point, or maybe he'll potentially be the champion by July of next year. But I personally don't think the guys at the top of 170 pounds are great matchups for Sean Brady stylistically. Like JDM, I think is honestly a tough fight for Sean. JDM has shown a pretty good ability to stop takedowns, and if he could stop takedowns versus Brady, and Brady's stuck on the feet against JDM, I just think JDM is gonna put combinations together, have a lot of success, and maybe even eventually be able to knock out Brady. For Bilal Muhammad, he actually already beat Sean Brady in the past. I'm not saying Brady can never win that fight, but I actually also think Bilal is kind of a difficult stylistic matchup for Sean as well. Talking about Shavkat, I think that's a really, really tough fight for Brady because, yes, I'm sure he's going to try to wrestle, but, Shavkat also has great wrestling and has good jiu-jitsu, could certainly get back up if he does get taken down. And similar to JDM, if Brady is stuck on the feet with Shavkat, I think Shavkat is eventually going to land some sort of big shot. Shavkat is a guy who's super aggressive, obviously, and he does take a lot of counter shots, and he does eat a lot of shots. We especially saw that in his fight versus Jeff Neal, as he was eating a lot of shots, even got hurt in that fight. But eventually, he does a great job at just landing a big shot. We saw that against Jeff Neal. We saw that in a lot of his other matchups. And I think against Sean Brady, who's a guy who's not an amazing striker, honestly, a little bit open on the feet. He certainly can get hit on the feet, as we saw against Bilal. I think Shavkat would eventually land a big shot. Now, outside of that, some of the guys lower in the rankings than those couple guys that I mentioned, I think have a real chance to beat. Uh, Okay. Have a real chance to potential. Sean Brady has a chance to beat, but I don't think he's going to fight any of those guys lower in the rankings than some of the fighters that I already mentioned. Brady's a gorilla. Yeah, he kind of is a gorilla. His striking is obviously not amazing. He doesn't have a ton of power on the feet, but the best thing that Sean Brady does is his wrestling is like solid, I would say, in terms of his like offensive takedowns. But once he's able to get the fight on the ground, he has tremendous control. He has a really good ability to submit guys. I think we saw that against Leon. And even if the submissions aren't there, he's just going to control you for 5 rounds if he's able to get takedowns. And obviously, as the fight does progress, if he's able to get takedowns in the first round, it's just going to get easier and easier as that fight does progress, especially if it's a 5-round fight. So Brady is a very good fighter. I don't want to say that he's not. I just think stylistically, a lot of guys at the top of the welterweight division are just tough matchups for Brady. And I personally don't see him beating JDM, Bilal, or Shavkat, honestly. So if he's not able to beat those guys, I don't think he's going to become a champion. So I don't think he'll really be an option for the White House card. And anyways, I don't think Sean Brady's, that big of a name anyway that could potentially be on a huge card. So I don't think he's really an option. In the middleweight division, Strickland's obviously not getting another title shot anytime soon or probably ever. And outside of him, there's really no Americans. There's really no Americans in the middleweight division. Does ESPN do promos for pay-per-views? They do. Yeah, they do. I've seen a couple of promos for this upcoming pay-per-view on some commercials or whatever from ESPN. Yeah, so they typically do not typically. They always do for all the pay-per-views. But in the light heavyweight division, honestly, if I had to say the most likely guy to become a champion, at least to be able to compete for the belt or even become a champion, an American, I think it's probably Khalil Roundtree. As I said, I know a lot of guys say Brady. I just don't think stylistically it's a great matchup versus some of the top guys. But at the light heavyweight division, I think Roundtree has proven a really good ability to make improvements ever since the Alex Pereira fight. And even in the Pereira fight, he was doing a really good job early at landing some shots. He even dropped Alex in that fight. As the fight just progressed, Alex Pereira is just a really, really good striker with a lot of power. And he was eventually able to tire out and get Khalil Roundtree. But Roundtree did a phenomenal job at bouncing back after that loss, beating Jamal Hill in a pretty dominant fashion. And I think some of the guys at the top of the weight class, maybe he fights Yuri next, or maybe he fights Olberg next. I think some of those guys are honestly winnable fights for Roundtree. The Yuri fight being the more difficult fight between the two, but still, I kind of think Roundtree's on that level of some of these top guys at the light heavyweight division. Who's the easiest champion to beat? I think I would probably say Ankalaev. I don't think Ankalaev is bad, but when you just look at some of the other guys in some of these weight classes, like Pantoja, he's obviously ridiculously difficult to beat. On the feet, he has a lot of power and he can hurt you. On the ground, he's probably one of, if not the best jiu-jitsu practitioners. Him and Charles, I think, are kind of neck and neck. People kind of forget about Pantoja, but he's ridiculously good on the ground. We've seen it. And essentially all of his fights, when he's able to get a takedown, he gets a submission the majority of the time. So he obviously has amazing jiu-jitsu. For Merab, he's also a really dominant champion. I think he's very difficult to beat. The only way you can possibly beat Merab is to knock him out. And I just don't see that. Sean O'Malley was honestly the only guy that I thought could have. I thought Merab would beat Sean, but Sean does kind of have that one-shot knockout power. But outside of him, nobody else does. Umar doesn't. Peter Yan doesn't. Corey Sandhagen doesn't. Song Yadong, he has good power, but I don't even think he would beat Merab. Figueiredo, I don't think will beat Merab either, although he has good power. And going down the list, I don't know. I just don't really see anybody beating Merab at this point. For Volkanovski, I will say I do think he is beatable by a guy that has a lot of power and is very technical, which I guess would be Gene Silva. But I don't think Gene's going to get the next title shot. I think it's probably going to be Movsar. It's Movsar and Pico is going to be the number one contender fight. I think Movsar is going to win that fight, and I think Volkanovski beats Movsar. So So yeah, Wellmaker for the bantamweight division. Wellmaker, yeah. The thing about Wellmaker though is he hits really hard, obviously, but he hasn't been tested too much. I think he's probably going to be good, but obviously he hasn't been tested too much, and he's still unranked at this point. So he's going to have to put together a bunch of wins before he gets a title shot. So yeah, yeah, he actually probably could beat. Well, I don't know, probably, but there's a chance he could beat Merab just because the power that I touched upon before. If you're going to beat Merab, you have to knock him out, and Wellmaker obviously has really good power for that weight class. So I mean, it's possible. I just think I would like to see him tested a little bit more for one, and for two before he gets a title shot. It'll be a while anyway. Tapora is obviously going to be tough to beat. JDM, I know he's not favored against Islam next, but I think he has a real chance to beat Islam, and against some of the other guys like Bilal, he already beat. Sean Brady, I think, is a good stylistic matchup for JDM. I even think Shavkat Rakhmonov is a good stylistic matchup for JDM, just because Shavkat is really aggressive and he's powerful and he's successful, obviously. But he is very open. We saw Jeff Neal land a lot of counters on Shavkat, and JDM is slicker boxing than Jeff Neal, obviously. So I think JDM could really put together some combos, land some really big counter shots on Shavkat, and I think eventually he would probably knock him out. So I think JDM would beat a lot of guys. Dricus, he may lose his next fight to Hamzat. That's kind of the fight of the year, in my opinion. We'll see what happens. But I think he's a pretty difficult guy to beat. Ankalaev is good. This is probably my answer, though. But Ankalaev is good. It's just the thing about him is what he does well is he's okay at wrestling. He's not even that great. He's okay at wrestling, but he has good striking. He's very defensively sound, but he doesn't, I don't think he does anything like extraordinarily well. I guess he has really good defense, but I think against a guy who could offensively wrestle a little bit better and as well as strike a little bit, I think he is kind of beatable in my opinion. We'll see what happens with Alex and him the next time they match up, if that fight even does end up happening. I think it probably will. But we'll see what Alex is able to do in the rematch. I think he could win. I don't favor him to beat Magomed, but I think he could win. And for Tom Aspinall, as I said many times, I think he's just going to beat everybody. I think he's going to get a lot of title defenses. He'll probably get, I don't know, like 5, 6, 7, 8 title defenses. I wouldn't even be surprised. There's just really nobody at the heavyweight division that I think would give a real chance. It would have a real chance to beat Tom. By the time Wellmaker gets a title shot, I'm going to be retired. Yeah, I agree. That's probably true. Okay, yeah. Yeah. So it'll be a while before Wellmaker does get a title shot if he's that good. I mean, listen, he's shown a lot of good things. Obviously, good power and good striking, but of course, he is fighting unranked guys. He just fought what's his face in his last one. That's really not all that good at all. So we'll see how he matches up going forward in the future. But I do think Wellmaker's probably a pretty good fighter. So we'll see what happens for Malcolm. Why can't I say Agame? But oh, it doesn't let you say that? Wait, what? That's weird. I promise I don't have that blocked. He rated me, and I really appreciate him for doing that. But yeah, I don't know. That's weird. But yeah. So in terms of who I think is the most beatable, I'll give you two answers, I guess. It's either Magomed or Volkanovski. And as I said, the reason why I would even consider Volkanovski to be there is just because he's getting a little bit older, and I don't think he's going to be able to take shots as well as he did maybe a little bit early on in his career. And also, I think Gene Silva is a very obvious guy that could and I think would beat Volkanovski. But for Pantoja, I think Van could beat Pantoja, but I'll favor Pantoja. And from Rob, I fully expect him to beat Corey. For Taporia, I fully expect him to beat either Armin, Gaethje, or Patty. For JDM, I think him versus Islam is kind of a 50-50 fight. I think people are kind of overlooking JDM. I think he's a real chance to win. The boxing ability of JDM, his ability to stop takedowns, the fact that he's going to be bigger than Islam, I think is going to be huge. Also pretty good power as well. So I don't think he's a walk in the park for Islam. I think that's a legitimately very tough fight for both guys. For Dricus and Khamzat, I think they're a very difficult stylistic matchup for each other. For Dricus, I think he's actually the toughest stylistic matchup for Khamzat in the middleweight division, just because yes, he probably is going to get taken down. He's been taken down a couple times throughout his UFC career. And in the first round, he'll most likely get taken down by Khamzat. But I think at the same time, he'll make Khamzat work. And the more you can make Khamzat work, while at the same time avoiding a finish for Khamzat in the first round, the easier it's going to get throughout. We've seen Khamzat go a little bit later against Kamaru Usman after, he really try to wrestle and get a submission or get a finish in the first round versus Usman. But once that second round and that third round came around, Khamzat was significantly more tired. Khamzat's cardio, I will say, looked pretty good against Gilbert Burns when they fought. It was a 3-round fight. I know some people say he looked gassed, but to me personally, I don't think he looked that bad in terms of his cardio. But the difference in that fight as compared to, some of the others is Khamzat decided to not wrestle at all in that matchup versus Gilbert. So he wasn't really going, all out like he was going against Kamaru Usman. So, I think Khamzat or Dricus has a chance to make it a very difficult night for Khamzat Chimaev. And for Magomed, I think he beats Pereira, but I think Pereira could make some adjustments and potentially win the rematch. And for Tom, as I said, he'll probably just beat everybody. So a lot of the current champions that we have at this point, I think are like very, very good. But I guess the only unfortunate part is I feel like we don't have amazing competition for some of these guys. Like Volkanovski versus Mosar is great. But Merab versus Corey Sandhagen, I don't think that's a great matchup, honestly. I think that's a relatively easy fight for Merab. Pantoja versus Van is a great one. Topuria versus Armin would be a great one, but I'm assuming it's probably going to be Topuria versus Patty, and I don't really think Patty has much of a chance versus Topuria. JDM versus Islam is going to be a good one. Dricus versus Khamzat's a good one. Pereira versus Magomed, I think it's a good one. And then Tom versus Cyril Gane, I don't think Gane has much of a chance against Aspinall either. As I said, for Tom, it's just all these contenders at the top of the heavyweight division are really throughout the entire heavyweight division. Tom has an advantage in one aspect of the game. Like against Gane, Tom can just take him down and submit him. Against Volkov, he can either strike or take him down and submit him. Against Pavlovich, he can strike or just take him down and submit him. Against Curtis Blades, he can just strike and knock him out. Against Charlton Almeida, he can just strike, avoid takedowns, and knock him out. Against Waldo Cortez Acasa, he can do whatever he wants. Tybura, whatever he wants. Spivak, whatever he wants. Derek Lewis, just avoid the big shot and he'll win. Tai Tuivasa, he would beat. Gaziev, Mick Parkin, Budai, Taliesin Teixeira, and Kuniev. There's really just nobody, honestly, at the heavyweight division that would give much of a test for Tom Aspinall, unfortunately. But I guess that's just kind of how it goes. Yeah. But outside of that, yeah, really not too much news or anything like that. Obviously it's fight week. We'll see how this card goes in terms of next week. I think we're going to have some good fights as well. It is unfortunate with the co-main event getting pulled, obviously, but Whitaker versus RDR is a good one. RDR is kind of similar to Dricus a little bit, where he has plot armor. It seems like he has a weird style and he's getting pieced up or he's not having success. And then all of a sudden he finds a finish or he finds a victory over his opponent. So it'll be interesting to see how RDR compares to a guy like Whitaker, who's obviously had a lot of success, is a Hall of Famer for sure at the middleweight division, and a guy who's also notoriously very difficult to take down. And takedowns are a big part of RDR's game. So we'll see what happens in that fight. I kind of lean towards RDR. I kind of feel like, similar to a guy like Dricus, he's going to find some sort of weird sequence where maybe in round one, Whitaker will do the better work for the most part, but I could see some sort of weird sequence where RDR lends a big shot, maybe hurts Whitaker a little bit, or maybe he finds a weird sequence where he finds a takedown. And if he does, find himself on the ground with Whitaker, I think RDR will have a pretty big advantage, and he may be able to find a submission or a ground and pound finish or whatever. But I kind of feel like RDR is just going to figure it out somehow against Whitaker. But that's going to be a really good fight. Peter Yan versus Marcus McGee is a good one as well. For Yan, obviously, he has amazing boxing, really good kicks as well, even a really good wrestler. And I personally think I have a video about this coming out pretty soon next week. But I just feel like Peter Yan kind of has Marcus McGee covered everywhere. He's a better striker. The power advantage maybe is for Marcus McGee, but slightly. But even in terms of the wrestling, Peter Yan could certainly out wrestle Marcus McGee if he wants to. I think people see the striking of Peter Yan and obviously it's amazing. He's an amazing striker, but people forget that Peter Yan is also a really good wrestler as well. And I think he can have a lot of success even in that department if he decides to wrestle against McGee. But it's really up to him. I also think he's a better striker than Marcus. Kind of a weird fight to put together. Marcus McGee is like the 13th ranked guy at this point. Let's see. Marcus is, he's the 13th ranked guy, and Peter Yan's the number 3. So kind of weird matchmaking to put these guys up against each other. But Burns. This is weird. Yeah, I don't see this on YouTube. I don't know. It's not popping up, but I see it on my streaming software. But Burns felt like a dumbass stop backing up. Yeah, Burns was backing up quite a bit against Hamzat. But what was I going to say? But yeah, I think probably the reason why the UFC put together that fight between Peter Yan and Marcus McGee is obviously the next title shot is going to Corey Sandhagen. But I believe after the Corey Sandhagen fight, Merab's going to beat Corey. And I think the next guy after that is probably going to be Peter Yan. Yes, Merab did beat Yan in pretty dominant fashion before he was champion, but at this point, I just don't really think there's another obvious guy to give a title shot to outside of Peter Yan. So I think what the UFC thought, and probably what Peter Yan thought, is they want to keep this guy a little bit busy, get one more victory before he's able to get a title shot again. And probably everybody was busy fighting somebody else or booked to fight somebody else, or maybe they just declined a Peter Yan fight. And I think the UFC was kind of moving their way down the rankings until they got to Marcus McGee, and McGee accepted a fight against Peter Yan. And that's kind of where we're at this point. So I kind of think it's just a fight to stay active as opposed to, a legitimate fight. But for Marcus McGee, it is a really good opportunity to potentially beat a guy like Peter Yan, a former champion, a guy who's, the number 3 contender, a guy who's had a lot of success at the bantamweight division. And it's a huge opportunity for Marcus. Marcus does have a good amount of power and he's a solid striker. I just personally think that Peter Yan kind of has him covered everywhere. So we'll see what happens in that matchup. But I do think that that's going to be kind of a masterclass level performance for Peter Yan in that one. And then we have Bryce Mitchell and Said Nurmagomedov. This is an interesting one. Obviously, Bryce moving back down to bantamweight, or not back, but he's moving down to bantamweight. I think it's probably a better weight class for him. I thought at 145, there was a couple guys that just were way too physical for Bryce, and he wasn't able to do much. Obviously, it turns out that they were some of the better fighters at that division. But when you talk about Gene Silva and Ilia Topuria, it really just seemed like Bryce Mitchell, physicality-wise, had no answers at all for either one of those guys. I guess maybe for Ilia, he had like a couple seconds of success, but for the most part, he didn't really have any answers for him, and he definitely didn't have any answers for Gene Silva. So I think it's probably a good move, him moving down to 135. I think his ability to find takedowns is probably going to be a little bit easier and maybe a little bit better at 135. His power was never amazing at 145, but maybe it can be a little bit more substantial at this lower weight class, and we'll see how he does. I think specifically this matchup versus Said Nurmagomedov is probably a good stylistic one for Bryce Mitchell. Nurmagomedov is very explosive, and he does hit pretty hard for that weight class, or I really should say kicks very hard for that weight class. But for Bryce, I think he's going to be able to pressure, stop a lot of the kicking opportunities for Nurmagomedov. He'll be able to, clinch up, find takedowns. And one thing about Nurmagomedov is in the first round, when he's fresh, he's really good. He has a great ninja choke. He has great kicks. He's very explosive. He kicks really hard. But if you're able to make it out of that first round, and especially back up Nurmagomedov, you can really start to gas him out. And I think we saw a lot of that in the throughout his career, honestly. UFC wanted to put O'Malley in a title shot, so they fucked over Jan. Yeah. Yeah, Jan, listen, I thought going into that title shot that O'Malley got last time versus Merab, I honestly thought like nobody deserved the title shot. But if you were to give it to somebody without fighting next, of course it should have been Peter Yan. O'Malley just lost to Merab in his last performance, and it wasn't all that close. That performance wasn't even all that close anyway, and it wasn't an all-time war or anything like that. So it's kind of weird that Sean just got an immediate title shot immediately after losing to Merab. But man, dang it. But yeah. So I just broke my my nail clipper. Dang it. But yeah, it was weird matchmaking. But obviously they just think that that Sean O'Malley's some sort of superstar or whatever. But I always thought it was pretty clear that he wasn't a star, just because whenever Sean would be on a card when he was champion or when he was making his way up to becoming a champion, the UFC would always stack his cards. So when you talk about guys like Conor McGregor or John Jones or other stars in the UFC always, they do this all the time. They would just have that main event, and because they were such a big name fighting in that main event, like Conor or John Jones or somebody like that, the rest of the card would be like really bad. When you look at a lot of Conor cards, the rest of the card is usually like not all that great at all. And it's because Conor McGregor is such a big star, so the UFC thinks they can get away with it and just put together a card like that. But for Sean O'Malley, his cards were always like ridiculously stacked. So I always thought that was kind of an indication of Sean not being a star. But I don't know. I guess the UFC, I don't know what sort of metrics they saw, because I don't think pay-per-view sale wise, Sean ever did really that great for the company either. So I don't know the metrics they saw, maybe, online kind of stuff. But I never really thought Sean O'Malley was a big star. But the UFC obviously thought so, and that's why they gave him that title shot versus Merab. But we'll see what happens in the bantamweight division going forward from here. I think, as I said, I think Merab's going to beat Corey Sandhagen. I wouldn't even be shocked if he found a finish. He's starting to implement submissions within his game as well, which is pretty big, honestly, based on his style. So, he'll probably beat Corey. Jan will most likely beat McGee. And then it'll probably be Jan versus Merab again, the rematch. Obviously, the first one didn't go great for Jan. The second one, I think he'll probably perform better than he did the first time. But at the end of the day, I just think it's probably a pretty bad stylistic matchup for Peter Yan against Merab. I think a lot of people, Merab's a bad stylistic matchup for a lot of guys, but specifically for Yan. Just because he kind of needs to get going. He needs to put combinations together to have success. He's not a guy that's just going to throw singular shots at a time. And I kind of talked about this before with Bilal and JDM yesterday, but Merab did a great job at shooting a million takedowns on Peter Yan to really not allow him to get anything going, or not really allow him to put any combinations together or anything like that. And I think we saw that game plan come into fruition and become very effective against a guy like Peter Yan. So we'll see what happens in the rest of the bantamweight division. But yeah. But what else? Let's do a little Twitter check to see if anything came out. Let's see. Well, a lot of people are picking Kyler Phillips for this upcoming weekend. I personally really don't see it. Kyler Phillips is a good fighter. Obviously, he does have good skill. He's pretty good early on, I'll say. Does a great job at honestly just being dynamic on the feet and putting some things together. But as the fight does progress, he really does tend to gas out, especially if he's getting pressured alongside the cage. And I think Rob Font was able to do that effectively versus Kyler, and I think Vinicius Oliveira will also be able to do that effectively against Kyler. So we'll see what happens, but I'm fully expecting a 3-round decision victory for Vinicius, or possibly even a 3rd-round finish for him. But we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. Oh, man. But let's see. Let's see if there's anything going on here. Oh, by the way, this is something that I was that they were talking about on the pre-fight show, I believe for the last pay-per-view. But they were talking about Dustin Poirier, um, about him and whether or not if he's a Hall of Famer. And I thought it was a good question. Do you guys think Dustin Poirier is a Hall of Famer? Obviously, he was never an undisputed champion. He was a he was a he was an interim champion, but he was never an undisputed champ. So would you consider a guy who's never the undisputed champ a Hall of Famer? I thought it was an interesting question. You first Guru, homie, challenge him to a fight. We'll make your channel blow up. All right, sure. I'll call out MMA Guru if he ever sees this with 4 people watching in the live stream. You dudes are in the same weight class. I hope not. I hope not. Guru's a little bit bigger. I'm like 6 foot, 190 pounds. I don't know what he weighs or how tall he is or anything. But he's I think he's a little bit bigger. But then honestly, it felt like he was a little bit bigger. But then when he was next to Dricus, it seemed like he was a lot skinnier than I initially thought, or most people initially thought. So I don't really know what Guru weighs, honestly. But he's been doing a great job, honestly. Just blowing up his channel, doing live streams, doing a bunch of videos. He's obviously pretty funny as well. But you know, he's been doing a great job. You dudes can make the same weight class, bro. Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't really know what he weighs, but yeah, I guess so. Probably can make it work. Put the fight together, Rick. Be the promoter. I'll accept the fight. I don't think it's a champion. I don't think he did a champion. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, listen, I probably would say Dustin is a Hall of Famer. But I just thought it was an interesting question because obviously he was never an undisputed champ, but he had a lot of success over the years, becoming the interim champ once, and also beating some great fighters along the way. He beat Max Holloway a couple times. He beat Conor McGregor a couple times. He's beaten other great fighters over the years. So I definitely think Dustin has had an amazing career thus far, and it is kind of crazy that this is going to be his last fight. This is a retirement fight, but I think it's probably a pretty good setting to do so. He's going up against Max Holloway, who he fought when Max was making his debut, and obviously him and Max have just been two of those guys over the years that always put on really fun performances that have been very successful over the years, even Max being an undisputed champ for a while. And I think it's a very fitting fight for Dustin Poirier's retirement fight, alongside with the fact that he's fighting at home. So that's pretty cool for Dustin. We'll see what happens. I know Conor's probably gonna be wanting that rematch, but at this point, it's pretty clear that I think Dustin is retiring. I talked about this before, but if Dustin beats Max, especially in dominant fashion, like a finish or something, does the UFC call Dustin and say, "Listen, we're going to give you a title shot against Ilia Topuria"? Do they say that? I mean, I wouldn't be like completely shocked if that happened. I don't know if Dustin has his mind set on retiring or not. I know after his last fight, he said he wanted to retire when he lost to Islam, but then he decided to come back a little bit later. So who knows? I mean, if he gets a big finish over Max, which I don't think is going to happen, but theoretically, if he got a big finish over Max and the UFC said, "Listen, we're going to give you a title shot versus Topuria," I kind of feel like Dustin would accept that. And also, I've talked about this before. At 155, I think Topuria beats everybody relatively easily. I think he beats Arman. I don't know if he'll beat Arman easily, but I think he does beat Arman in the end. I think he beats Patty relatively easily, and I think against Gaethje, that's probably one of the easier fights for Ilia. But I always thought Dustin was a really tough fight for Topuria because Dustin does a great job, boxing in the pocket. And what Topuria does effectively is getting on that inside boxing range, putting combinations together and landing big shots and knocking out his opponents. We saw that with Max Holloway. We saw that with Volkanovski. We saw that with Charles Oliveira, alongside with other guys as well. But for Dustin, I almost feel like he'll want to fight in the pocket. So I think that might be, honestly, kind of a tough fight for Topuria. I think Topuria probably figures it out in the end still, but tough stylistically. What makes a fighter enter the Hall of Fame? In my opinion, or in general? In my opinion, what makes a fighter enter the Hall of Fame is I probably would say a guy that's held the belt and gotten a bunch of title defenses or beaten a bunch of great guys over the years. And obviously, Dustin doesn't check that box off. But the reason why I think Dustin probably is a champion or is a Hall of Famer is because he did get the interim belt. Yes, it wasn't an undisputed belt, but he had a really long career. He's beaten some really great fighters over the years. So I think I probably would consider Dustin as an exception to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. But in general, I would probably say a guy who's a champion, who's beaten great fighters over the years, who's had a good amount of longevity. That's probably the criteria I would say. When you look at a guy like Jim Miller, I know a lot of people want to put him in the Hall of Fame, but in my opinion, I don't really think it makes that much sense. Yes, he's had like ridiculous longevity, and that's very respectable. But it's not like he's been at the top of the weight classes or been ranked or been a champion or fought for the belt a couple times. Like Jim Miller's not really that kind of guy. He's kind of just fighting a lot, and he's effective for his age, and he's effective against some of these unranked guys. But I don't personally consider Jim Miller a Hall of Famer to me. I think it's when you're talking about the Hall of Fame, you're really talking about, the best of the best. And Jim Miller is great. Obviously, I don't want to say no, but I think he's only in consideration for the Hall of Fame because of his longevity. And I personally don't think that's that's warranted in my opinion. Most and least charismatic fighters of all time or right now, I would say most would probably be Conor. Prime Conor McGregor is probably the most. But the least charismatic fighter is maybe like Sean O'Malley. Honestly, he's pretty like not charismatic. He has his fighting style is great. He has the appearance of being someone who, would trash talk pretty effectively or whatever. But really, whenever you hear this guy in the mic, he doesn't sound all that great. His comebacks aren't great. His trash talk's not that great. So I would probably say he's pretty non-charismatic, if that's a word. So I'd say Prime Conor, Sean O'Malley, just two guys that came to my head at the moment. But there's probably honestly better answers than what I gave. Jim Miller in the Hall of Fame, i.e. Iron Man, Gilbert, style. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Jim Miller has the most wins in the UFC Hall of Fame. Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. Like, yes, he does have the most wins, and Derek Lewis has the most knockouts ever. But I heard DC bring this up when actually this conversation came about, and I actually think it's not a bad one. So yes, Jim Miller has the most fights, or what is it, wins? The most wins in UFC history, which is obviously an amazing achievement. But eventually, I mean, probably not for a long time, but you would think eventually somebody's going to break that record. So if the only reason for why Jim Miller made it to the Hall of Fame was because he was a record holder for the most wins in UFC history, when that record is broken, inevitably, it's probably not going to be anytime soon. But eventually, when that record's broken, then it's going to be like, why was Jim Miller in the Hall of Fame? Or for Derek Lewis, he has the most knockouts in UFC history. But inevitably, I feel like someone's probably going to break that record. And whenever that record does get broken, then the question would be, why is Derek Lewis in the Hall of Fame? And I don't know. I thought that was like a decent argument. So I don't know. At least in my opinion, of course you guys can disagree or whatever. But in my opinion, I feel like to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, you need to be a champion. You need to have beaten some of the best fighters over the years, and yeah, I mean, you have to have a resume where you were legitimately one of the top fighters in the UFC during your period. And obviously for Dustin, he was never an undisputed champ, but he was always one of the best fighters in the UFC when he fought. Even at this point, he's retiring. Obviously, this is a retirement fight, but he's like the number 5 ranked contender, and he legitimately could beat guys ahead of him in the rankings as well. So Dustin has always been a top level fighter throughout his entire career. I think if you put Dustin in the UFC, you have to put Usman in there. And fuck Usman. Usman, I definitely think Kamaru Usman deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I guess obviously you don't like Kamaru, but I think he should definitely be in the Hall of Fame. He was a champion. He had 4 title defenses. I believe it was 4. It was against Masvidal twice. Then it was against Gilbert Burns and then Colby the second time. So yeah, 4 title defenses. I know a lot of people say that Usman never really beat the guys. They thought, Masvidal wasn't great, Colby wasn't great, and even Gilbert wasn't great. But in my opinion, maybe the Masvidal thing you have a point on. I guess he is kind of a journeyman. But for Gilbert Burns at the time, I thought that was a good win for him. Gilbert, when he was in his prime, was a pretty good fighter. He was a guy that had okay striking, but great power and great jiu-jitsu. I thought he was a pretty good fighter. Even gave Hamzat trouble, obviously. And for Colby Covington, I know a lot of people like to trash in Colby, but I thought when he fought Usman the first time, and even when he fought Usman the second time, like he was a very good fighter. So I honestly think both of those wins, beating Colby twice and beating Gilbert, were honestly some pretty good wins for Usman. So I personally think he's definitely a Hall of Famer, but I know a lot of people disliked him, especially when he was the champion. People were saying they were boring fights or whatever, but yeah. 4 title fights. That's what you think puts you in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, I would probably. Well, obviously, I guess it depends, but I would probably say yes. I mean, if Jim Miller is going to be in the Hall of Fame, then a guy like Kamaru Usman would have to be in the Hall of Fame. I think that's without a doubt. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, listen, we don't have to agree or whatever. I just personally think Usman probably should be in the Hall of Fame. But we'll see. We'll see. Opinions on Poopy Toopy Farm. I don't know. We'll see how his career pans out. But I don't know why, but that made me think of Fluffy Hernandez for some reason. So for Fluffy, I'll just give you an answer on Fluffy. I don't think Fluffy's that good. He has good cardio, but I think somebody's eventually going to catch him once he moves his way throughout the rankings. And I don't think he's going to be a top 5 guy, and I don't think he's going to compete for the belt. But I have been wrong in the past. I was wrong about Dricus, and I was wrong about some other guys as well. So we'll see what happens for Fluffy. But in terms of Poopy Doopy Fart Muffin, I don't know if he's going to be competing for the belt anytime soon, but he's good. He's got good wrestling. So we'll see where he goes from here. But yeah. Which fighter's most likely to get lost? Tito Ortiz. That's my answer. Tito Ortiz is probably the most likely. Current fighters, I would probably say, what's a good current fighter? Tito Ortiz is definitely the answer. But if I had to say a current fighter, let's see. Who's a current fighter that's not all that smart? Bryce Mitchell? Maybe Bryce Mitchell. I can see Bryce Mitchell getting lost. Or getting lost in a specific section. If they have a specific section in there. But yeah, I think Tito. Tito has all-time funny moments, though. That he was doing some sort of promotion for some MMA organization when he was on the mic, and he threw the mic, tried to have a cool moment, and just hit him right in the head, and he didn't react at all. It's hilarious. He just has hilarious moments. Tito's he's an interesting one, but yeah, I guess not the highest IQ on that fella, but I would probably say Tito. But yeah, man, freaking A. Let's see, boys. Bryce Mitchell versus Amin Zahabi. Who wins? Bryce Mitchell versus Amin Zahabi. I always thought Zahabi wasn't all that good, but in his last performance, he looked pretty good. I mean, I know Bryce. I don't know, honestly. Bryce Mitchell versus Amin Zahabi. I'll probably say Bryce. Maybe he can find a takedown and control a little bit better, especially at 135. I thought at 145, Bryce has skill. He can wrestle. His striking's all right, but I just thought he didn't have the physicality for 145. Obviously, as I touched upon before, against Gene Silva and against Taporia. I mean, obviously, those are all-time fighters, in my opinion. But against both of those guys, it appeared that, the physicality wasn't even the same caliber, not even close. So I think at 135, maybe Bryce could be a little bit more effective with some of the shots that he throws. And also, I think his wrestling would be more effective. So probably, I'll probably go with Bryce Mitchell. Who more boring, Lean or Beal? Lean or Beal? What do you mean? Lean like drinking lean? I feel like Bryce Mitchell would win just out of pure motivation. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I honestly think Bryce would win. Who's most likely to throw a fireball in the octagon? Who's most likely to throw a fireball in the octagon? Yuri Prohaska. I'll say that. Either Yuri Prohaska or Tony Ferguson. He's thrown sand in the octagon before, so I could see Tony throwing a little fireball in there. I think Bryce, I would agree. MB with the little unicorn. Gamrot versus Fiziev, who wins? Fiziev. I mean, they already fought before. I know Gamrot technically beat him, but it's because Fiziev blew his knee out. I think Fiziev is a really tough fight for Gamrot. Gamrot is good. He has great wrestling, but Fiziev does a great job at stopping takedowns. And if the fight's, if Gamrot's stuck on the feet against Fiziev, he's not going to have a lot of success. I mean, we even saw that when these two fought the first time. Very short fight. I believe it was the first round that Fiziev blew out his knee. But in that short time that we did see this fight go on, Fiziev was piecing up Gamrot. So I think Fiziev would win that one in the rematch. Bilal is most likely to throw a fireball for Raiders. Yeah, I can see Bilal doing that. But yeah. I wish in a weird world we could have seen Yuri versus Tony Ferguson. I feel like that would be one of the funnier fights. Also a really good one, but if they could somehow cut to the same weight class, which obviously they can't, but theoretically, if they could, I feel like that would just be a really fun fight. Like a lot of interesting things happening in that fight, a lot of weird techniques getting thrown out in that fight, and yeah, that would be a good one. We'll have Tony with the sand. We'll have Yuri Prohaska with that weird defense where he was using his head for defense in one of his fights. So I think that'd be an interesting one. But yeah, what's going on, brother? Welcome to the stream. We're currently talking about who's most likely to throw a fireball in the octagon. I think it's Yuri. Some of you guys think it's Bilal. What's up, Sean? Alway looking beefy, putting on size back on. Yeah. He's doing a much better job this time at putting on more weight as opposed to the last time that he fought Dustin. And I think that's going to actually be a pretty big factor in this fight. Bilal or Leon, who's more boring? I kind of want to say Bilal, but he kind of did put on a fun performance in his last one where he was looking to strike against JDM. So that was kind of fun. And for Leon, I think really the only non-boring fight that he's been in is when he was able to head kick Usman. And even that fight, like, it wasn't that exciting before the head kick. He was kind of just getting dominated by Usman. So honestly, maybe Leon's more boring. I don't know. Leon just doesn't go for it. I don't know. But yeah. You see Damian Lillard back to the Blazers. I did see that. Yeah, he's making $70 million this year to not play at all. That's crazy, bro. But it's pretty cool though. I'm happy to see Dame going back to Portland. Yeah, good for him. But yeah, he's going to be out for this year, fortunately. What's going on, brother? Welcome to the stream. On the kick side of things, what's going on? He put on a muscle against Gaethje though. Or two. Yeah, he did. I think we're probably going to see the same Holloway against Poirier this time as we saw against Gaethje the last time. as I said a bunch of times, when Max fought Poirier the first time, or well, really the second time, I guess, when it was for the interim belt, I thought I thought, it was very apparent that when Max was having success, he was just landing combinations. He was doing a good job at landing punches and combinations, but his punches weren't really doing anything. He wasn't all that powerful at that time. And when Dustin was able to land, he was really hurting Max. But at this point, I think Max has done a better job at putting on muscle, putting on size, alongside with hitting harder. I think even at 145, we saw Max hitting a little bit harder than he used to in the past, and alongside with the added muscle. Of course, he was able to knock out Gaethje clean. He was able to knock him out cold. So yeah, I do think we're going to be seeing a different Max Holloway this time against Poirier as compared to what we saw last time. But yeah, I'm new to your channel. I love the way you stream. Thanks, bro. Thanks so much for joining the stream. Did Jose Aldo ever improve during his title run? Did he ever improve? I guess probably no, honestly. I guess he didn't. I mean, he was just obviously like an all-time fighter from the beginning. Insane. I mean, prime Jose Aldo had the best takedown defense that I've ever seen. And even at this point, he was able to stop all takedowns from Merab, and we've seen what Merab was able to do to other guys. So his takedown defense was elite. His kicks were elite. His ability to throw punches in combination was elite. He hit pretty hard even. So he was obviously really good from the beginning. But yeah, maybe not. Maybe he didn't make improvements, but he was just so good that maybe he didn't need to or whatever. So I would probably say no, but he was still really good. With a win this weekend, could Holloway's comes on the title fight? I heard Holloway's is planning on calling out Topuria, which I'm assuming he will if he does win. If he does beat Dustin, though, I don't know. I think probably not, honestly, just because, he already lost and got finished by Topuria already. Listen, beating Dustin's a big win, and probably typically that would get him a title shot, especially considering where Max is in the rankings. But since he already lost to Topuria, and since he already got finished by Topuria, I think you'd probably need one more win. I think Topuria is going to fight one of the three of Patty, Gaethje, or Arman. It's going to be one of those guys, and after he fights one of those guys, I think he's just going to move on to 170. So for Max, if he wins this weekend, he'll probably just need to get one more win, and then if he does get that, I think he could certainly get a title shot again. Holloway might need one more win before. Yeah, I agree. But the thing is, like, we might not see that Topuria fight again. I personally thought it was a really good fight. As I said, I personally think Max is one of the tougher stylistic matchups for Topuria, but I just don't know if we're going to see it again, just because, as I said, I think Max fights one of the three guys that I mentioned before. I think he'll probably beat them, and then assuming Islam wins at 170, I think Topuria is just going to move up. And I think Dana's going to allow it. He doesn't usually like guys moving up, especially like Topuria moving up twice in a short amount of time. But I think Dana would allow it because Ilya versus Islam is just such a big fight, and it would sell so many pay-per-views that I don't think Dana would really mind that. So for Max, one more win after beating Dustin, if he does, he'll most certainly get a title shot, because it's probably not going to be against Topuria, at least in my opinion. How many games do you stream? Do you play per day? I don't play any games. I kind of just talk about MMA. Do you have a Twitch as well? I do have a Twitch. Same username, Juicy MMA. And I'm currently streaming on Twitch as well. Why was Max Holloway an underdog versus T-City? I have no idea. Very dominant performance from Max. He was even teaching T-City how to defend punches in that fight. So yeah, weird betting lines. I think over the years we've seen some like really weird betting lines, and sometimes I've been able to take advantage of them, sometimes not. I thought when MVP fought Shara, MVP was like a plus 200, I believe, or plus 250. I thought that was the weirdest line in the world. MVP gives a lot of trouble to everybody in the striking, and Shara doesn't have any wrestling, so he was going to have to strike against MVP. And I thought MVP was going to, I just thought he was going to give Shara a lot of problems and win, and he was able to do so. So I thought that line was kind of weird, and there's been some other lines along the years that I thought were just kind of weird. So yeah, the Max and T City one was one of those examples where it's kind of weird. You're doing a watch along for UFC 318 prelims. I wasn't planning on it, but honestly, yeah, I'll do it. You've heard it here first. I'll be doing it. Yeah, so I'll do a watch along for the 318 prelims. For the main card, unfortunately, I'm not going to be doing a watch along just because I usually watch it with my boys. But for the prelims, I'll do it. And if you guys are still awake or whatever after the card's over, I could probably also hop on another live stream to do a little bit of an instant reaction. But I know I'm going to be doing why I was right or why I was wrong for Poirier versus Max Holloway as soon as that card is over. As soon as the card's over, I usually like to record it and try to get it out the next morning. So I'll also be doing that. But I will be doing a watch along party for the prelims, and if you guys are interested, maybe I'll also do live stream after the card's over, just to talk about instant reaction or results or whatever. Because TCD has yes, he does. Yes, he does. He was almost able to finish Volkanovski a couple times. Very impressive. Which fighter is most likely to discover exceeding speeds? Ooh, this is a good one. Which fighter is most likely to discover exceeding? I would say Joe Rogan. I mean, he's not a fighter though. Joe Rogan's a good one. I would say, man, chat, help me out here. Who are some good examples? Let's see. This is a weird one, but I think this could be one. Roman Dolidze, maybe. I know he likes to be in the wilderness a lot. I usually see that on the embeddeds when he's fighting on a card. So maybe Roman Dolidze. It's kind of like a weird answer, like out of left field, but I think he could be one. Maybe some of the guys in Dagestan. I guess they're kind of in the mountains. Maybe. Well, no, actually, I take that back. Not the guys in Dagestan. Yeah, so I'll say Dolidze. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll just say Dolidze. I don't know. I'm kind of blanking out. Oh, Yuri. That's a great one. Yuri. That's the answer. It's Yuri. If Holloway goes out this weekend, comes out unscathed, maybe he fights again this year against Hooker or Oliveira. That'd be a good one. Yeah, I already know. I already know that that Max Holloway wants to fight Charles Oliveira, and I'm sure Oliveira wants to fight Max Holloway. Obviously, Oliveira did just get knocked out by Topuria, so we'll see how much time he needs off. But I think I did hear some rumors of Charles wanting to fight again in December, and maybe Max would also be ready to fight again in December if he comes out relatively unscathed or not too significant of damage, I guess. So I could possibly see an Oliveira versus Max Holloway matchup getting booked later on this year, maybe in December as a co-main event or something like that for the pay-per-view. So we'll see what happens. And against Hooker, I've said this a couple times already. I just don't know where Hooker's at. Obviously, he was supposed to fight Gaethje, and he had to pull out because of a hand surgery. And I saw like about a month ago or maybe a few weeks ago that his hand was still like messed up pretty significantly. So I don't really know where Hooker's at this point, if he's able to train, if he still needs time off. So I just don't know where he's at. But yeah, Yuri lives in the shack. Only issues is to see what's fun. That is true. That is true. Yuri's who do you guys think is the most interesting fighter in the UFC? It's probably Yuri, right? For the most interesting guy. Or I don't know, who's another one? Tony Ferguson was one, but obviously he's in the UFC anymore. But yeah, it's probably got to be Yuri. I heard Hooker was a backup for UFC 318, but injured his hand again. Oh wow, I didn't know that he was the backup. That's pretty cool actually. That would have been a good fight, Hooker versus Poirier or Hooker versus Max. But he injured his hand again, so yeah, so he's probably going to be out for a while then. He's probably going to be out for a while. That sucks. Hooker's on a pretty good run, honestly. He's on a 3-fight win streak. At this point, he's legitimately in the top of the rankings of 155. Next up would be, a pretty big fight. And if he's able to win his next fight, he might get a title shot or be very close to it. So it's kind of unfortunate that Dan's having these issues with his hand. Hooker said in a recent interview that he wants to return in November in MSG. That would be good. That would be good. I definitely don't mind seeing Dan Hooker fight again. So we'll see how his hand heals up or whatever, and how long it'll take him. Lori, he might be a mythical fighter. Yeah, I mean he just graduated college, so good for him. We'll see what he does with his degree. But yeah, definitely an interesting fighter. I think my favorite clip ever of maybe my favorite interview ever in the UFC was Yuri explaining to Megan O'Leary about two crazy guys that he's going to bring to his room after he won against, I think it was against Jamal Hill. He's like, I'm going to bring two crazy fucking guys from my village back to my room and they're going to see something. That was like the funniest interview I've ever seen, just because obviously it sounds like ridiculously sus, but I think it's pretty obvious that Yuri's not like that. But the reason, at least to me, why it was so funny is because like I can't even, like, what is he talking about? I can't even imagine what this guy's talking about. And he even had his clarification interview with the Schmo, and he didn't clear it up at all. And he just said the same thing. He just said like, I'm straight, and that's it. But he didn't actually clear anything up about what he meant. So that was such a funny Yuri moment to me. Yuri's a national treasure. The most interesting, in my personal opinion, is Yuri. Dude was that's the same. Yeah, it's I would agree. It's probably got to be Yuri. He's definitely the most interesting guy in the UFC. But he definitely is a national treasure. He's really, really funny. And yeah. Honestly, I'm gonna bring up that interview if you guys haven't seen it. It's honestly so funny. I was actually just watching it the other day. All right, let's pop this up. I'm sure most of you guys have seen this, but I can't go wrong with that. Yeah. All right, there we go. All right. Here we go.
You know, I took a two crazy guy from my village to here to see this event, and they are here. And today I will bring them to my hotel, and they will see something. You know.
And then so that's that, and then the clarification. Here's a clarification. He didn't clarify anything.
Yeah, I want to clarify the interview.
I don't know. This is so bad quality. Here we go. What the fuck? It's only 360. That's bad. Whatever.
After the fight, what we had, and I spoke like, and I said something like, we will celebrate with the guys on the room and all these things. So just to be sure to everyone, man, I'm a, like you said, straight man.
You like the females.
This is what I want to say, man. I just want to say that two my friends came from Czech Republic, from my childhood, what I know from my childhood. And every time we celebrating like very wild, like everybody's party is look like something, but we are really again, you see, again, it sounds like it sounds weird. So no, it doesn't matter for me.
Listen, the schmo saw you macking out.
Yeah, so that's just clarification where he didn't clarify anything. That's hilarious. But yeah, Yuri's hilarious. But yeah, Holloway has so much pop in his punches at 155. Don't be surprised if he rocks Dustin. I agree. I actually think it is definitely a possibility. I mean, the way he was able to knock out Gaethje, obviously, I think proves that he has a lot more pop at 155. And as I said, even at the tail end of 145, against a Korean Zombie as well as some other guys, Max was doing a much better job at sitting down on his punches a little bit more at times, and landing shots with more power. So I think that alongside with the added muscle and the added weight moving up to 155, I think the pop on his shots are going to be a lot more. And even when you watch that Gaethje fight back, obviously at the end, Holloway was able to get that insane KO, in my opinion, the greatest KO ever. Just based upon, where it was literally the last second, they were just going at it. And he was, after winning the entire fight, he was able to do that. I thought it was crazy. But even besides that knockout at the very end, Holloway was doing a really good job at hurting Gaethje a bunch of times throughout that fight. He was landing some big shots throughout the entirety. So I definitely think Max has a lot more pop in his shots at 155 as opposed to what he was able to do previous in his career. So I do agree with you. Dustin is going to have a longer reach than Holloway. Yeah, he will. But the thing about Dustin is he tends to just fight in the pocket. He doesn't really utilize his reach all that effectively in most of his fights, which is fine because he's effective fighting inside the pocket. But what Dustin really wants to do is pressure you alongside the cage, get in the pocket, and just throw counter shots, throw a nasty right hook. He has a really good right hook, and just throw punches in combination. And obviously Dustin also has a good amount of power that he's shown throughout the years. So yes, he does have a longer reach than Max, but I don't necessarily think it's going to come into play where Dustin is looking to fight at range and he's landing jabs and left or right straights, I guess left straights, at range. I don't really think that's going to be too much of a factor, the reach, to be honest, because I think they're kind of just going to be in the phone booth just boxing. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely something to think about, though, at the same time. But we'll see. Listen, obviously, Dustin as well as Max have had amazing careers thus far. Obviously, stylistically, this is probably going to be a really fun fight. Both of these guys, of course, always go for it. For Dustin, for Max, I don't know if either one of these guys have ever been in a boring fight. So I think we're in store for a pretty good one this upcoming weekend. And as I said, it's a really good matchup for Dustin to go out and against a guy like Max Holloway. It's going to be a fun fight, most likely. He's obviously fighting in his hometown. We'll see if he's able to get the victory. I kind of think Max is going to win this third time around, but we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be a really fun fight, to say the least, though. So we'll see. Double it up. But yeah, we'll see what happens on this card. I'm kind of hoping that this card outperforms what it looks like on paper. But we'll see. I also think Holloway Topuria is going to be a different fight if they rematch. Yeah, probably. I think probably Holloway is going to have a little bit of a tweak game plan, but I actually thought his game plan going into the Topuria fight was a really good one. He was kind of keeping the fight at range. He was utilizing a lot of head kicks. I thought that was big. Obviously, Topuria has been caught with a head kick prior. So I thought that was a good game plan for him. And I thought he had a lot of success. People say it was 1-1. Some people say it was 2-0 Topuria. But regardless, I think it was pretty clear that Max was Topuria's toughest fight in the UFC thus far for him. And I thought his game plan was pretty good. But I'm sure he'll make, some sort of subtle adjustments or whatever, and maybe the fight would be different if they were to rematch. But as I said, unfortunately, I just don't know if they are. I think Topuria is more focused on moving up to 170 as opposed to staying around at 155 longer, and I don't think Max is going to get the next title shot against Topuria. As I said, most likely it's going to be Patty, but we'll see what the UFC decides to do and where they decide to go from there. 305 subscribe, brother. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for the subscription. I appreciate all the comments as well, and everything. I really do appreciate it. I'm just trying to pump as much content out, pump as much good content out as I possibly can, and obviously with these live streams as well. So I'm definitely pushing forward. As I said, I live stream every day during the week, 8 p.m. Eastern. On weekends, I live stream on 2 p.m. Eastern at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And this upcoming weekend, as Joshua suggested, I will be doing a watch along for the UFC 318 prelims. So be sure to be on the lookout for that in terms of videos at this point, Wednesdays and Fridays at 2 p.m. And after this week, I'm going to be moving to 3 uploads a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So yeah, I'm definitely going all in on this YouTube thing. It's been really fun process. And thanks so much to everybody here for supporting and just talking about fights and stuff. And Holloway hits more hard and lightweight. He could potentially rock Topuria on the feet. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, listen, Holloway definitely does hit harder. The thing about Topuria, though, that I will say is I think he's proven to have a really good chin. I'm not saying that Holloway can't rock Topuria, but he took a head kick from Jai Herbert. He did get hurt, and obviously he got dropped. But most guys get finished taking a shot like that. Topuria was almost leaning into the kick, and he took it clean, and he was still able to survive. Alongside some other fights he's been in. He's taken some pretty big shots over the years, but I think Topuria has shown an amazing chin. As I said, doesn't mean that he can't get rocked. I just think it would be difficult for Max to rock him because as I said, even at 145, I thought Max was showing better power before the Topuria fight. But I mean, listen, at 155, I do agree that Max is probably going to hit harder, alongside with the fact that he's a pretty difficult stylistic matchup for Topuria. So we'll see. Listen, you certainly could be right. I just don't think we're going to see this fight, unfortunately. But I mean, I would personally like to see it. As I said, it was a really close fight the first time. Maybe Max can make a couple adjustments. Maybe, I mean, he definitely does hit harder at 155 as compared to 145. So maybe that will be a difference maker in this fight. I would like to see that fight happen again, but we'll see if the UFC decides to book it. But yeah, I think we're going to start to see some retirements. There was a certain point at the lightweight division where it was just the same guys fighting each other and everyone was complaining. It was Gaethje, Poirier, Chandler, and was that it? I think it was those three guys. They would just like consistently fight each other all the time. But I think at this point, we're going to see a lot of those guys retire. Dustin's already retiring after this fight. I think for Gaethje, he said if he doesn't get the next title shot, he's going to retire. I don't think he's getting the next title shot, so he might retire. And for Michael Chandler, he hasn't really talked about retiring or anything, but I think he's pretty washed at this point. And at this point, he's moving down the rankings. I saw even a rumor. I don't know if it's a rumor, but I saw some people talk about him potentially fighting Terrence McKinney. And nothing against Terrence McKinney, but if you're rumored to fight a guy who's unranked after being in the UFC for a decent amount of time and fighting some of the UFC's best, I think that's a pretty good indication that you should probably retire. But as I said, nothing against Terrence McKinney. He is like very explosive, very athletic, hits really hard, has really good wrestling, good jiu-jitsu. I think he showed a pretty good performance in his last fight. But just coming from where Michael Chandler has came from to fighting a potentially unranked guy, I think is kind of a good indication of where his career is at this point and why I personally think he should retire. Because when Chandler was at his peak, I guess, in the UFC, if you want to say that, what he was doing very effectively was he was just utilizing his explosion, utilizing his power, and eventually he was able to land a big shot on essentially everybody he went up against. He was able to hurt Gaethje. He was even able to hurt Poirier. He was able to hurt Charles in both of their fights. But when you watch, I mean, I guess it could theoretically be a bad performance, but when you watch his performance against Patty, he really didn't have any explosions. I believe there was one explosion where he landed kind of a big right hand when Patty was going in for a leg kick. But outside of that, Chandler really wasn't able to do much in terms of the explosion. And, if he's not able to explode, that's kind of his entire game. So he's really not going to be effective without that explosion. And, based upon that, I think he should probably just retire if he doesn't have that. Alongside with the fact that he's been losing a lot and he's taken a good amount of damage throughout the years. Against Poirier and against Gaethje. I mean, that was a ridiculous amount of damage. And even against Oliveira the first time when he got finished, that's more damage, as well as his Bellator career. He's taken a lot of damage. So I personally think that Chandler should probably retire at this point. I really don't see him having success against many guys at the lightweight division. But yeah, I mean, those were really the guys that everybody was complaining about for a certain point, that they were just fighting each other, holding up the division. But, it seemed like all those guys, I guess not for Chandler, but for Gaethje and for Poirier, it seemed like they were just beating the next generation. Gaethje beating Fiziev and Poirier beating BSD. So that's why they were continuously staying at the top of the weight class and continuing to fight each other, I guess. But if those guys do retire, Gaethje, Chandler, and Poirier. The lightweight division is still good. There's still definitely good names. Armin's a really good fighter. Charles is always going to be a really good fighter. Max is a good addition to that weight class. Dan Hooker is a good fighter. Gamrot, I would say, is solid, but there are limitations to Gamrot just due to the lack of physicality. Patty is solid, I guess. But I guess my point is, I don't think the lightweight division is going to be the premier division anymore if those guys do retire, Gaethje and Poirier. I always thought that the lightweight division was like really where the best fighters in the world were fighting. And I think that was true for a while, but if those guys retire, I just don't think the second class of fighters are as good, especially Islam also not being at the lightweight division anymore. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with these guys and with the rest of the lightweight division. There's also probably young up and comers though that are going to be pretty good. Lightweight usually turns out to be a pretty good weight class, so we'll see what happens. But obviously, as I said, Armin, Holloway, Hooker, Patty, even are all really good fighters. And even for Fiziev, I think Fiziev is really good. I just think the problem with Fiziev is he's probably like a 145er. It's a tough cut to 145 for Fiziev just because, he's very muscle bound and I think it'll be a tough cut for him. But for 155, I just don't think he has the explosion or the power to be good enough. I think he's good enough to beat a guy like Justin Gaethje, but I think we saw it in the first fight as well as the second fight. He's able to land shots on Gaethje, but he just doesn't hit hard enough to really affect Gaethje all that much. And I think the lack of physicality is a real issue for Fiziev. In terms of skill, he's great. He has great kicks. He's pretty defensively sound, honestly. Once he's able to get in the inside, he does a great job at interior boxing, putting combos together. He's pretty fast as well, good footwork. But the problem is when he does land his shots, it doesn't land with all that much, power, at least for 155. So if he's able to, I think it probably would be a good idea for Fiziev to move down to 145. But as I said, he is very muscle bound, and I don't know if he's able to make that weight cut. Yeah. But at 145, I think there's a lot of good matchups for him. I think he can beat a lot of these guys. I think he'll beat Josh Emmett. Aljamain Sterling is like, I think Aljo's good. He's a really good wrestler, great jiu-jitsu. But for Fiziev, I think Fiziev is a really difficult fight for Aljo because Fiziev has amazing takedown defense. I think it'll be tough for Aljo to get takedowns. And if he's forced to stay in the feet against Fiziev, I don't think Aljo's going to have really much for him. On the feet, Aljo just does a good job at utilizing range, utilizing footwork, and throwing kicks. Outside of that, not really much. All these upcoming requirements. So why the gym alignments is so impressive? Yeah. That is true. I do agree with that. Jim Miller has been fighting forever, and at this point, he's still getting victories. So it is really impressive, regardless of who he's fighting. If he's fighting unranked guys or not, it really doesn't matter. The fact that this guy has been able to fight for so long, it really is honestly really is impressive. He's been able to make tweaks in his style to continue fighting and continue fighting at a relatively high level. So it definitely has been really impressive to see what Jim Miller has been able to do over the years. There really hasn't been too many examples. I know Dustin has been fighting for a really long time, but he's retiring. For Gaethje, it seems like he may be retiring. Listen, I know he said if he doesn't get a title shot next, he's just going to retire. But guys have said that in the past, and UFC offers them a boatload of money, and then they decide to fight somebody else. So we'll see what happens for Gaethje. But, some of these guys, we could be getting relatively close to some of their retirements. But, yeah, Jim Miller has been doing it forever. We'll see what happens for John Jones. John Jones is also a guy that's been doing it forever. And I know everyone is hating on John Jones right now, and rightfully so, but he has been fighting forever, and he's been fighting at the top level forever. So we'll see. We'll see if he fights again. Maybe he's retired, but definitely is interesting. Dustin G are all 34 over it. Yeah. It is pretty crazy. Moicano being the same age as Dariush is so weird to me. It really feels like Moicano is like, I don't know, like 28 or something. But But yeah, he's the same age as Dariush. Yeah. But either way, I mean, Moicano, he's just not good enough to. He honestly, he does kind of have a similar game to Charles, but just like way worse. Where on the feet he has like some ability, on the ground he has really good top pressure. He has really good jiu-jitsu. Decent wrestler, not amazing, but decent wrestler. He's kind of just like a budget Charles Oliveira, but like a super budget Charles Oliveira. But yeah, I just don't think he's good enough to beat any of the top 5 guys or get really anywhere close to that. And for Dariush, I think he is actually good enough, but the problem with him is he just can't take a shot at this point. And he's really not athletic. He's relatively slow. He's good in terms of skills. I think he's like, honestly, maybe a top 3 guy, top 5 guy at the very least in terms of skill. He has great takedown defense. He has great jiu-jitsu. Striking is like all right, but in terms of his grappling, he's like very elite. But as I said, when he goes up against guys that have good power and are fast and athletic, he just has a lot of trouble. We saw that against Charles. We saw that against Arman, and other guys at the top of the weight class. I think will give Dariush a lot of problems. But as I said, in terms of skill, I think he's right up there with a lot of these guys. And Chandler as well is over 34. Yeah. But the thing is though, out of all these guys, I will say, like, I know Dustin's retiring, but for Dustin, I would say, yeah, he's retiring, but it's not like he's done in fight. Like he's not washed or anything like that. He's just retiring because he wants to or whatever. But it's not like he's washed, like he has to retire. For Justin, I would say the same. Justin has taken a ridiculous amount of damage over the years, but still, he's still a legitimate top 5 guy. He's still a very good fighter. So he's not like washed or anything at this point. Gamrot, the same could be said. Even for Dariush, I think the same could be said. It's just, I think throughout his entire career, he always struggled with guys that hit hard. And especially at this point, after getting knocked out by Charles and Arman, I think it's even more pronounced, but I don't think he's like washed per se. I think in his fight against Moicano, he really showed a really good ability to still be a really talented fighter, really skilled fighter. But yeah, so I don't think he's like that close to retirement for Moicano. I don't think so either. Dan Hooker, I definitely don't think so. Really, out of all these guys, Dan Hooker is like the only guy that's on the up and up at this point. And for Chandler, I think he's washed. I think Chandler's the one guy on this list that's like legitimately washed. But it kind of makes sense. The amount of damage he's taken over the years. For as much damage as Gaethje has taken over the years, I think Chandler has taken an equal amount or possibly even more. He gets hit a ridiculous amount. So we'll see. We'll see what happens at the lightweight division, which contenders, make their come up. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of really good guys. 155 historically is usually a really good weight class. And even already there's some guys that are really good. But we could honestly be in a timeline where let's just say Topuria beats Paddy, and then he moves on to 170. We could be in a real scenario where Arman Tsarukyan's the champion of the lightweight division with Topuria and Islam at welterweight, which would be kind of a weird scenario. But Arman is legitimately very good. So if it weren't for Islam, if it weren't for Ilya, I would probably say Arman has the best chance of being the champion at this point. Arman versus Max Holloway is an interesting fight, but I think the wrestling of Arman may be a little bit too much. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with the lightweight division. But yeah, some interesting things. Definitely some questions that are going to be answered this upcoming weekend. We'll see who wins the fight, obviously, in the main event. And the other thing that I talked about a couple of times, if Dustin does get a knockout over Holloway, which I don't think is going to happen, but theoretically, if it did, I really would like to see where his head goes and where Dana White's head goes. Like, do they just offer him a title shot against Topuria? I think that's honestly a really, really good fight, Topuria versus Dustin, but I don't know. First, I don't think Dustin's going to beat Max, but even if he does, I don't know, but we'll see. I almost kind of want to see that, but I don't think it's going to happen. A lot of moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts for a lot of things, honestly. But yeah. Which weight class do you guys think is the best in the UFC? My answer is kind of I feel like an answer that most people won't say. But for my answer, I actually think it's the flyweight division because Pantoja's at the top. He's a super dominant champion. But alongside with that, there's so many like legitimate contenders at this weight class. Like guys that I personally would consider contenders are Joshua Van. Obviously, he's fighting for the belt next. But Joshua Van, Brennan Moreno, even Brandon Royval is a good fighter. KKF is he's a solid fighter. He's good power. Manel Kopp, I think, is a legitimate contender. Even Steve Urseg, I know he lost a couple times. I still think he's a legitimate contender. I think what's his face? Tamirov, I think, could be a legitimate contender going forward. I think Kaya Sakura, even though he lost to Pantoja, he lost to Pantoja, the best fighter, one of the best fighters in the UFC. I even think he could be a legitimate contender. I think he beats a lot of guys. But yeah, honestly, I kind of feel like flyweight might be the answer for me. Welterweight is really good right now too. That is true. Yeah. So in the welterweight division, of course, you have JDM, you have Islam moving up. Potentially, you have even Taporia moving up. Bilal Muhammad. I know a lot of people like to hate on him, but he's good at what he does. Sean Brady is a solid fighter. Shafkat is a really good fighter. Leon kind of quits, but he's skilled. Usman is, I guess, a little bit old, but he's still very good, of course. Ian Gary, people like to hit on him, but I do think he's pretty good. He's pretty good at he kind of fights boring fights, but he's very good at just stopping what his opponents want to do. I think we see that a lot. We saw that specifically versus what's his face? Versus Shafkat, where Shafkat wasn't really able to do what he wanted to do and blitz and throw a lot of shots, a lot of power shots. And I think we saw Ian Gary do a great job at stopping that. So he's good. I think Michael Morales is very, very good. I think he'll become a champ before it's all said and done. Protest is good. I even think Kevin Holland is a legitimate contender. So yeah, the welterweight division is really, really good. Kai Zero grappling. Yeah, his grappling definitely isn't great. But I just personally, maybe guys disagree. I just personally think getting taken down and submitted by Pantoja is not really, it's not really like a bad thing. It's like, oh, you got taken down and submitted by Pantoja, you're not really all that great. I don't really feel like that's what I walked away feeling like after seeing that fight. But we'll see. Listen, if he gets taken down and submitted by some other guys in that weight class, then I guess maybe guys would have a better point. But we'll see what happens. But in terms of the stand-up, I think Kai is as good as maybe anybody else. But listen, if he actually has like no grappling, then I guess it doesn't really matter. Guys will just look to wrestle, take him down, and submit him. But we will see. We will see what happens. His next fight is actually coming up. When is it coming up? Next weekend or something? His next fight, or is it on? No, I believe it's on UFC 319. Yeah, his next fight's against Tim Elliott. If he loses to Tim Elliott, that's not a great sign. I think he should beat him. But we'll see what happens for Kaya Sakura. But yeah, so I think flyweight's good. Joshua was talking about welterweight. Welterweight is really, really good. If you're talking about like current guys, even obviously even lightweight's good with Taporia, Armin, Charles, Gaethje, Holloway, Poirier, Hooker. That's a really good top 6 or top 7 guys, including Taporia. And even Patty's an up-and-coming guy. I'm not too high personally on Patty, but still, I have to appreciate what he was able to do to some of the guys he's fought. But yeah, at featherweight, they have some decent fighters. I think Evloev's good. Lopez, I think is solid, but I don't think he's amazing. I think Yusuf Zalal is really good. I think Gene Silva is really, really good. I think Yair is all right. Arnold Allen is solid. Ortega's like okay. Lerone Murphy is solid. Aljo's good. I don't know. Yeah, the featherweight division is not amazing. But there's a couple guys that are good. I think Zalal and Gene Silva are 2 guys to look out for at the featherweight division. By the way, Calvin Kattar is still ranked in at featherweight, number 15. I think that's a little ridiculous, to be honest. He's on like a 4 or 5 fight losing streak. He really hasn't looked to have all that much success in a lot of his recent fights as well. So I don't personally think he should be ranked, and I personally think Calvin Kattar should consider retirement at the very least. But we'll see what happens for him. But yeah, outside of those 2 weight classes, I don't think any other weight class is really in contention. Middleweight is all right. Dricus is really good. Imavov is solid. Strickland's all right. Hamzat's really good. Adesanya is maybe, not as good as he was. Whitaker, probably the same. Caio Borralho's, he's a solid fighter. Cannonier's a solid fighter. Delitse's okay. Fluffy, I don't think he's that great, but he's all right. RDR is, I think, solid. So not amazing. Obviously, light heavyweight's not great. There's really just a couple guys at light heavyweight. It's just Magomed, Pereira, Yuri, Roundtree. Outside of that, there's no one amazing. And heavyweight is just atrocious. The worst. What do you guys think is the worst weight class in the UFC? I think it's obvious, but what do you guys think? I think it's definitely heavyweight. I have a video about this coming out pretty soon. By the way, I just recorded a video today. I don't remember who it was, if it was you, Pencil Shavings, or if it was somebody else. But somebody, if it was you, Pencil Shavings, let me know in chat. I'll give you credit. But I got to go back through the live stream yesterday. But somebody told me to make a video about weight cutting and why guys weight cut. So I actually just recorded that today. That's going to be coming out in a little bit of time from now, just because I have a lot of videos scheduled. But that'll be out, I think, in like 2 weeks from now. Or a little less than 2 weeks, but probably around then. So yeah, thanks for the video idea, and yeah. Women's bantamweight might be worse than heavyweight. Yeah, I think it actually definitely is. If we're including women's weight classes into this, I think it is as well. Kayla Harrison's she's just kind of like juiced and powerful, but she's whatever. Juliana Pena being the number 1 contender is criminal. I think she's terrible. Pennington being the number 2 ranked contender is insane to me as well. I think she's terrible. Caitlin Vieira is whatever. Duman is whatever. Chason, I don't think is that good. Aldana has okay striking, I guess, but she doesn't really have an ability to make adjustments. I even think Alini Perez is not really that good either. Bueno Silva is not good. Santos, no. Rosa, no. Cavalcante, no. Mishite, no. Jocelyn Edwards. Ironically, I think the number 14th ranked women's fighter at the bantamweight division might be one of the better fighters at that weight class, Jocelyn Edwards. I think she has an ability to strike out there and have success. But I mean, even her, she's not actually good. I just think the women's bantamweight division is so bad. There's really nobody at that weight class. So yeah, I probably would agree with you. That's probably the worst weight class in the UFC. But for men's weight classes, it's got to be heavyweight. It's unfortunate though, because throughout history, the heavyweight division has always been the cream of the crop. The weight class that everybody looks forward to. A couple of big guys throwing down, getting knockouts and whatever. And outside of Tom Aspinall, there's really nobody that's super exciting at the heavyweight division. That's why I've been saying for a while. I know it's probably not going to happen. I know Dana probably doesn't want this to happen, but I've been saying for a while, I really want to see Francis Ngannou re-sign with the UFC and put together Francis versus Tom Aspinall. That's an amazing fight. It makes a lot of sense. Francis is not fighting in the PFL. He fought once and he's been signed there for 2.5 years, 3 years. So I think it's pretty clear the PFL can't afford to pay him. So it actually might even make sense for the PFL. Yes, he's their biggest star, but they can't afford to pay him. They can't afford to put on Francis Ngannou cards. So at least that's what it seems like. So, just let him go to the UFC, whatever, and build your sport or build your company in another way. And for Ngannou, come back to the UFC, fight what people perceive to be the best heavyweight in the world right now in Tom Aspinall. See how your skills match up to Tom. And for the UFC, obviously, it also makes a lot of sense. That's the biggest fight you can possibly make at heavyweight, I think. And skill-wise, I think it's a legitimately 50-50 fight. Maybe you give it a slight edge to Tom Aspinall, but it's a legitimately difficult fight for Tom. So I think it makes sense for everybody involved. UFC will make money. Francis will make money. Tom will make money. Huge fight for the fans. I think it makes sense, but as I said, I don't think the UFC is going to do it because Dana has a grudge. I wouldn't come back to the UFC if I was Francis. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, maybe he feels that he was done dirty by Dana White in the UFC, and maybe rightfully so. I don't exactly know what happened. But yeah, I mean, listen, if he feels like he was done wrong by the UFC, that's fair. But there was a rumor that came out a while ago saying that Francis was willing to come back to the UFC, but it wasn't by Francis himself. It was by his coach. So I don't know if that's accurate or not, but if Francis is willing to come back to the UFC, then, listen, if I was Dana personally, I would definitely put this fight together. I think it makes all the sense in the world. But, knowing Dana over the years, he's a guy who tends to hold grudges quite a bit, and I just don't personally think he's going to be willing to have Ngannou come back to the UFC, and especially if Ngannou beat Tom, Dana would be losing his mind. Like having to wrap the belt around Francis Ngannou would be an absolute nightmare for Dana White. Even the last time that Francis won the belt in the UFC against Gane, Dana White wasn't even there to wrap the belt around them. So they obviously have their beef or whatever's going on after all the negotiations. But yeah. Let's see. The way Dana Shannon and Francis in the press conference trashing them, man, I would not come back to the UFC. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Dana definitely did trash him for a while. Especially like at the very end there when he was supposed to fight. Well, not when he was supposed to. When he did fight Ciryl Gane, and they were supposed to find a contract, negotiate a contract, and during that year, I believe, or a few months or whatever it's been, definitely hasn't been amazing relationship between the two. I think you need Tom to beat John or Francis to make the casuals believe he's the best heavyweight right now. Yeah, probably. Listen. To me, I personally, and I'm sure most of you guys would agree, I think it's pretty clear that he's the best heavyweight. But yeah, probably he'll have to beat some sort of big name to be perceived to be the best heavyweight at this point. But listen, I think that will come over time. If he doesn't fight John or if he doesn't fight Francis, I think Tom is going to beat Gane. I think he's going to start to beat a lot of guys. And if he's able to get to a point where he's at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 title defenses, who knows how long he can go. But if he's able to get like a ridiculous amount of title defenses, and especially if he's able to do it in a very, in dominant fashion, I really do think that fans are going to start to catch on, at least casual fans, and they'll start to realize that this guy's the best heavyweight. Then I'm calling Francis a bad guy is crazy work when you guys like John Johnson regretting the scribbles or anything. Yeah, that is kind of funny. Yeah, definitely interesting. But John and for as exciting as Francis was when he was inside the octagon, he wasn't a huge star. Maybe it was in part due to the UFC's lack of promoting for him, or maybe he didn't, he doesn't speak that much on the mic or trash talk that much on the mic, so maybe that's a part of it. But he put on very fun performances. But as I said, outside the octagon, it's not great. Well, he didn't make a star of himself, I guess. So I think the reason why Dana put up with John or Connor is because they made him so much money, more specifically Connor. But for Francis, I don't think he was a huge pay-per-view sell. I think him versus Tom would be, just because Francis has been away from the UFC for a while. Tom Aspinall is perceived by, I would say, most people, not everybody, but most people, to be the best heavyweight at this point, and Francis is really the only competition, in my opinion. But yeah, so I think that would probably sell pretty well. But yeah, what are you gonna do? So based upon that, Dana's not really putting up with it, and especially when Francis is looking to make more money and do other things that Dana and the UFC typically doesn't do. He was not happy about that. What I learned about Dana is when a fighter stands up to him and speaks up for themselves, you become enemy. Yeah, that's probably true. Unless it's a guy like Connor or something, and not that Connor's really done that, but unless it's a guy who makes you a ton of money, yeah. Dana likes yes men. Yeah, that is true. That is true. Yeah. But let's take this out. But we've been streaming for around like 2 hours, 15 minutes. It's been an amazing stream. Thank you everybody so much for joining the stream. If you guys have any last second questions, be sure to ask them and I'll answer them. But if not, I should be seeing you guys tomorrow on a live stream. If you guys are interested, obviously. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 8 p.m. I'll be also live streaming, Joshua, the prelims of UFC 318. So we'll, watch fights live. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about some fights. We'll see how I do betting wise. I talked about some of the bets. I'll also talk about some of the bets before the fights on that day as well. And yeah, we'll see what happens if any news or anything comes out. But I appreciate everybody for joining the stream. I hope to see you guys tomorrow. See you guys Saturday. Be sure to be on the lookout for videos as well. And yeah, peace out, boys. I hope you have a great rest of your night.